Welcome to This Dumb Week, a weekly live Twitter space hosted by Alex Marinos and yours truly, Dr. RollerGator. Available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and others. Alex, welcome back. Have you had a sufficiently dumb week? And we start off another week with me sort of lying to the audience because Alex is still in Greece on vacation, so I do not anticipate he's going to join us. Yet the intro is still recorded in advance, so I am not changing it because he will be back, I believe, next week. So we're going to get started on today's episode here. We are going to go first to Miami, where a elderly lady is fighting back against the city for issuing her a license plate SQZA55.
Really? Really? No, DMV, no. That's what I said. No, DMV. You're going back. That's what I said.
When Nancy Dell'Ostrita went to collect her mail, she got quite the surprise, a new license plate with her vehicle registration renewal.
And I looked at it, and I said, I don't think so.
The plate reads SQZA55, but from a distance, those 55s can be read as S's. Well, you get the picture. Squeeze blank.
I don't think a woman that lives in a senior community that's going to be 77 years old next month will be driving around with what this plate has to say.
The plates become the talk around her retirement community, especially the men. We were with her when she showed it to one of her 89-year-old neighbors.
And this is what I received from the DMV for my new license plate. That's good for 10 years. Good.
Nancy's plate was mailed from the Broward Property Tax Collector's office. We went there to try to help her get some answers. It's a question about a tag, if you want to replace a tag. And while no one wanted to talk on camera, we were told anyone unhappy with a plate can turn it in for another one for free.
I'm kind of resigning to it, and I figured maybe it was just destined to be on my car.
So for now, Nancy's keeping the tag, although she is planning to let the state know about it. She'll see the reaction when she goes public with her new plate.
I can handle it if I get a few honks here and there. Actually, being over 70, I might like a few honks.
So, way to go, Grandma, for taking your license plate and owning it and hoping that perhaps you can make some fun out of it. But, you know, squeeze ass is a nice license plate for an old lady to have inside of the retirement home. I think it makes her feel a little bit youthful in some ways. So that's good. Moving on, the Secretary of War, as we lovingly refer to here as Whiskey Pete, has decided that in support of his goal to make the United States military as lethal as possible, he has found a issue to tackle in the form of making its men more manly.
I'm authorizing a new screening program for testosterone deficiency for our service members, ensuring you have the right testosterone levels to operate at your absolute best. Because it's well-established science that as we age, testosterone levels often naturally drop. Under the supervision of our world-class medical professionals, warfighters age 30 and older are going to be tested annually as part of their periodic health assessment. It's a health assessment that happens every year. If treatment is recommended, it's entirely your choice to receive testosterone replacement therapy. This initiative, it's not about artificial enhancement. It's about restoring and optimizing your natural capabilities, protecting your longevity, and ensuring you have the biological foundation required to sustain the fight.
From Reuters, doctors question evidence behind Pentagon plan for testosterone screening. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth this week ordered annual testosterone deficiency screening for active duty and reserve service members age 30 and older, which he says will help maintain military readiness. But many medical professionals warn it might do nothing of the sort and instead could increase service members' risk of infertility or other consequences if testosterone is prescribed inappropriately. The mandate is one of several recent healthcare policy changes implemented by Hegseth and other Trump administration cabinet officers that have sparked debate among experts and raised questions about what scientific basis, if any, supports them. Haig says that they'll also reverse the military's longstanding flu vaccine mandate, a decision that has walked back after the flu outbreak, while the Department of Health and Human Services removed 17 members from its vaccine advisory panel and altered its vaccine recommendations. 5 of 6 men's health experts contacted by Reuters for this story said they were puzzled by the announcement on testosterone testing and concerned it may lead to unnecessary or even harmful treatment. Haig has said testing would be accompanied by advice to help soldiers make decisions about treatment, which would be voluntary. But goals, he added, are to ensure troops have the right testosterone levels to operate at their absolute best and to improve their resilience, longevity, and performance so as to ensure the military's combat readiness. 4 of the 6 doctors said there was no solid evidence suggesting that screening for low testosterone in all military personnel aged 30 and older would optimize U.S. readiness for combat. Quote, we hear from patients that when you treat low T, things like cognitive alertness and stamina improve, but the evidence is not concrete and it comes from patients who were treated because they were symptomatic, said Dr. Kevin McVeary, a urologist on the medical advisory board at RollerGator, a telehealth platform that provides testosterone supplements. The Pentagon declined to comment on the matters beyond the brief and official statement open. The American Urological Association and the Endocrine Society advise testosterone supplementation only for patients with confirmed testosterone deficiency and symptoms such as reduced libido, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, decreased male muscle mass, and low bone density. Giving testosterone without medical symptoms leads to overtreatment, McVeary said, which can have its own adverse consequences. Levels naturally decline with age, starting around age 30, but age 30 itself is not an appropriate point for screening, said Dr. Halim Mohammed, Chief Medical Officer of Men's Wellness and Medical Clinic Network Game Day Health. Quote, there is a population level decline of 1% per year after ages 30 to 40 that accelerates as you get older, but the patterns are not the same for all, Mohammed said. Most studies of testosterone replacement have been done in older men, noted Dr. Eugis Gruntmanis, the endocrinologist at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, who said the new mandate provides an opportunity to collect data on younger men. He added, however, that widespread implementation of screening without preliminary study data would be putting carriage before the horse. Based partly on a study led by Dr. Stephen Neeson of the Cleveland Clinic involving more than 5,200 men aged 45 to 80 with low testosterone and high risk of heart disease, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration revised testosterone labels to remove a warning of increased risks of heart attack or stroke. The participants, however, showed higher rates of atrial arrhythmia, an abnormal heart rhythm, and bone fractures, a finding that may have implications for the military. Sorry about that. All of the experts contacted by Reuters also mentioned the severe impact of testosterone therapy on male fertility. Many of our armed forces are young men who are not done having their families, McVeary said. If you just dole out the testosterone, the testes will shrink, and you can't reliably count on them coming back. Other risks include blood thickening, prostate issues, acne, hair loss, breast tissue growth, and mood volatility. In this announcement, Hegseth said one objective for the new screening mandate is to comprehensively address operator syndrome, which afflicts Special Forces warriors such as Delta Force members and Navy SEALs and includes low testosterone with traumatic brain injury, hormonal and metabolic dysregulation, sleep dysregulation, and other maladies. But Special Forces operators are not representative of all active duty and reserve members, said Dr. B. Christopher Frey of the University of Hawaii, whose team first described the syndrome in 2020. Quote, these operators are an extreme at the end of the spectrum. They have much higher exposures to blasts, airplane jumps, firing all kinds of different weapons, shoulder-fired rockets, machine guns. Other soldiers may have elements of the syndrome, he said, but would screening 100% of anybody be right? I don't know. He believes many younger soldiers could regulate hormones through sleep, rest, and diet to bring testosterone levels back up, rather than turning to replacement therapy. Still, medical professionals emphasize potential benefits from appropriate testosterone testing, as with other forms of medical tests. Game Day Health's Mohammed said military reservists in the general population may be overweight, another correctable factor that can contribute to low testosterone. Testosterone is one of the most useful blood tests we have to gauge health in men, Mohammed said. Broader screening would identify men with reversible causes and some with true deficiency. Both groups would benefit from clinician-guided care, whether that means correcting irreversible causes or starting treatment when it's truly warranted. The Pentagon has not provided detailed guidance on how abnormal test results will be evaluated or whether screenings will apply equally to males and females. Frey of the University of Hawaii said broad screening could also reveal new information about female soldiers' hormones. Quote, females aren't going to need testosterone replacement in all likelihood, but they may need other hormonal interventions, he said. Now we move forward to a news story that is near and dear to my heart, the hopeful adoption of making daylight savings time permanent.
When clocks spring ahead 1 hour, resulting in more sunlight in the evenings. Most of Arizona does not recognize daylight saving. It is important, though, for you to know, because now we will be 3 hours behind your friends in the Eastern time zone. Over the last few years, at least 19 states have passed laws to lock the clock or stay in permanent daylight time. It is a move that's gaining momentum. Lawmakers and advocates argue the loss of sleep is just too disruptive, raising the risk of heart attacks, strokes, even car accidents. But some experts are pushing back.
If we are on permanent daylight saving time, we're going to have many more dark mornings. People will be driving to work. Children will be standing there for the bus or walking to school in the dark.
In the long run, I'm optimistic because, it's a terrific bipartisan issue. Nobody's going to bicker about that part. So it's just a matter of getting it done.
Congress would need to pass a law to allow states to adopt daylight saving time year-round. Most Americans spring forward to daylight saving time every March and fall back to standard time in November. So we want to hear your thoughts on the daylight saving system. We have a poll up right now on our Arizona's Family Facebook page. So far, there have been almost 400 votes. 47% of you say you do not like the current daylight saving.
I love that. Was it 39% who just said, I don't care?
Oh. Why are you asking me this, but I'll still fill out your poll?
Yeah, precisely. I love it, but then it gets so confusing.
So now I'm in, according to my profile on X here, as I look through my timeline, the rare person who supports the hell out of changing everything to daylight savings time year round. Others have seemed convinced that this is going to cause some sort of mass death of children due to attempting to go to school in pitch black for many days out of the year. However, the shortest days of the year are actually come at a time when, typically speaking, there is a winter break for school. So the actual earliest, the latest sunrise of the year is actually during a time when kids are off from school, generally speaking. So the amount of time that the darkness would be extreme for kids going to school would be minimal, and it would not necessarily be the biggest deal in the world, considering a lot of schools are doing Zoom call education anyway. So I'm going to maintain that year-round DST is the better approach, and that those who want to keep the alternating DST and standard time operation going are insane, and those who want the standard time year-round are a little more sane. However, I do believe that the daylight savings time standardization year-round is the correct approach, and I have run for president several times under that platform. Stop fucking with the clocks.
Now to that terrifying video seen by millions, the grandfather attacked by a charging bison at Yellowstone. Well, tonight, hear what that grandfather is now saying. Here's Trevor Ault.
Tonight, the 65-year-old grandfather seen in these terrifying images viewed by millions, tossed into the air by a bison, is now breaking his silence about that heart-pounding encounter. Carl McDaniel tells CNN he and his 13-year-old grandson travel to Yellowstone National Park every year. On Friday, they saw that bison about 100 yards away. They stopped to take a photo of that massive animal.
They were plenty far away, in my opinion.
But the bison charged toward them. The grandfather telling CNN, quote, "He could be to us in seconds, so I told my grandson to run in one direction, and I went the other to try and draw him away." After circling the tree, McDaniel was flung 8 feet in the air, landing on the ground, unable to move. That bison, which can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, standing over him. He says, quote, "He could have stomped on me. He could have gored me. He could have done almost anything to take my life, and he did not do so."
He was in a lot of pain, and he was trying to not move his leg.
That grandfather was rushed to the hospital, his leg broken in 4 places. He's now recovering from surgery and can stand, but he'll need physical therapy to heal.
David, that grandfather says the other campers jumped in immediately to help him. He's thankful this wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been, and also that his grandson wasn't hurt. David?
We're glad they're all okay. Trevor, thank you.
And that bison was not the only thing from nature that decided to attack this week. If you are in the Northeast, you may have noticed that there have been excessive amounts of smoke causing health warnings for air quality control all throughout the Northeast. Visibility extremely low because of rampant wildfires in Canada. The president going on a Truth Social rant explaining that it is only due to Canada's poor land management that they have the wildfires as severe as they are, and that he is going to increase tariffs on them as punishment for their poor land management and making our air quality poor in the Northeast of the United States, with Detroit having the worst air quality several days this week out of the entire country.
Tonight, massive plumes of smoke from those fires in Canada choking the upper Midwest and Northeast for a second straight day.
I have asthma, and so I might be a little bit more concerned than other people.
Millions under air quality alerts in at least 19 states. New York City is handing out free KN95 masks at public libraries like this one and police and fire stations. The smoke, combined with this oppressive heat wave, is a dangerous pairing, especially for those with pre-existing conditions. Chicago recording some of the worst air quality in the world among major cities.
When you get to these burgundy dots, that's hazardous.
A Delta flight capturing the smoke-clogged skies over New York City, the pilot alerting passengers.
So if you do smell that little bit of smoke, that's what we're going through right now. But just want to let you guys know that's from the wildfires out west.
At Philadelphia International Airport, the low visibility triggering flight delays. Ash sticking to an American Airlines plane in flight.
Yeah, it's adhering to the windshield. I've never seen it stick to the windshield like this.
Tonight, more than 180 fires ablaze in Ontario, Canada alone. An American visiting the area seeing the inferno up close.
We're getting out of here. Getting a little close for comfort.
Also contributing to the orange haze, at least 9 fires in northern Minnesota. Officials warning some fires could burn for months.
There will be some fire on the ground in some form or fashion, along with smoke, until it snows.
Mary, this hazardous smoke is expected to linger for at least a few more days as it pushes further south toward Virginia and Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, here in New York City, officials continue to hand out free N95 masks just like this one to anyone who wants one. Mary?
So important to take those precautions, Matt. Thank you.
Those who tuned in last week were ahead of the curve in another national outbreak of trouble where nature was attempting to kill all of us. The cyclospora outbreak became one of the most talked about news stories as of Wednesday this week. However, we were first to cover it on Sunday. So when it felt out of place to you on Sunday, by midweek, you were actually the first to have known.
Do I have the diarrhea parasite? How much diarrhea is the diarrhea parasite? Dang it. Do I have the diarrhea parasite?
Stay tuned for a very important announcement regarding food poisoning.
The peas, the celery sticks, the meat and the fish will make you sick.
All the food is poison. All the food is poison.
The apples, tomatoes, wheat, and the corn, all the food is poison. Don't eat the food, it's poison food.
All the food is poison. All the food is poison.
It's getting worse. The number of Americans coming down with severe stomach problems from ingesting a parasite found on lettuce is quickly growing, with the number of victims doubling in some areas from just 1 week ago. Justin Finch has more on how to prevent becoming part of the statistic.
It's a skyrocketing crisis. There are now 7,000 reported cases in 34 states of the parasite Cyclospora invading the U.S. food supply. Michigan is ground zero with 3,000 cases, twice as many as a week ago. Lots of people are washing their greens as never before and think they see the parasite.
I just watched the cilantro. Look at the parasite. You see him? Oh my God.
In fact, that's not the parasite, which is too small to be seen unaided by the human eye. The ballooning numbers are spreading panic on social media. Galen Sekulich, a mother of 3 from Detroit, says she lost 10 pounds in just 5 harrowing days.
You look up night sweats and you look up nausea and you can't eat and you're rapidly losing weight. And I'm like, is something seriously wrong with me?
Lettuce and other greens have been identified as the source of the outbreak. The fast food giant Taco Bell confirmed it has removed lettuce and other raw ingredients from a number of restaurants as a precaution. Public health officials have not confirmed a link to Taco Bell. We will continue to closely monitor the situation, a statement says. Meanwhile, Americans are searching for safe alternatives to what was once a staple in their diet. It's called food swapping. She's eating a double cheeseburger without lettuce. This guy is going in a totally different direction.
No one ever got the explosive diarrhea parasite cyclopsoriasis from an ice cream cone.
At this Sweet Green Salad restaurant in Manhattan, these customers seemed unconcerned.
I'm like a salad girl. I always eat salads. Doesn't affect me.
I didn't know about the parasite, so this will taste a little different.
Top nutritionist Joy Bauer showed me healthy ways to avoid the parasite. The most perhaps helpful way to get past this is going to be to look for produce with peels.
That's right, because if you could imagine, this is a parasite that lives on the surface. So when you peel a banana, an orange, a mango, an avocado, an apple, a potato, you are peeling away the contamination and you're basically tossing it into the garbage.
Doctors are warning anyone with a weakened immune system to avoid eating fresh produce altogether until a specific culprit for the outbreak is determined.
Now, the government has been trying to identify the source of this outbreak, and there have been rumors floating around that it is Taco Bell that was part of the intersection of all the food consumed by people who came down with the runs there. However, a source for Taco Bell has been claimed to have been Tyler Farms, and the FDA and CDC have been releasing announcements that have hinted that those are the two sources for this outbreak.
And next tonight, after the CDC identified one potential source of a parasitic outbreak sickening thousands now across the U.S., Taylor Farms is now pulling iceberg lettuce sourced from Mexico from shelves across the U.S. Health officials warning Americans not to eat the lettuce served at Taco Bell restaurants in 5 states. Here's ABC's Elizabeth Schulze.
Tonight, the CDC and FDA warning Americans not to eat shredded iceberg lettuce served at Taco Bell locations in 5 states: Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia. Federal regulators now linking the lettuce to the cyclosporiasis outbreak, causing severe digestive issues.
It's nothing like I've ever had before.
Tonight, Taco Bell saying the affected ingredient has been removed from our supply chain nationwide. The FDA's investigation leading to an independent farm in Mexico. The supplier, Taylor Farms, one of the nation's largest producers of fresh vegetables, telling ABC News they are voluntarily removing all iceberg lettuce sourced from central Mexico from the U.S. market, and that no other Taylor Fresh Foods products are impacted. In 2024, slivered onions from the company were tied to the E. coli outbreak from Quarter Pounder burgers at McDonald's. Newlywed Gretchen Pless was on her honeymoon when she contracted cyclosporiasis and ended up in the emergency room.
Our vows said in sickness and in health, so we're just getting an early start on that.
So far, the CDC has reported cases across 34 states. The epicenter in Michigan, where health officials now say more than 5,000 people have been infected, over 100 of them hospitalized. The state typically sees less than 50 cases per year. Mary, FDA investigators are now racing to determine if other retailers or restaurants might be affected. The CDC says there could be other unrelated outbreaks. Mary.
And Elizabeth, we know you'll stay on this. Thank you.
As the cyclosporiasis outbreak continues, Taylor Farm says it is removing all iceberg lettuce sourced from central Mexico. However, the company also says no Taylor Farms branded salads or kits are associated with this cyclosporiasis outbreak, and that no Taylor Farms branded salad kits contain iceberg lettuce.
This all comes after the Washington Post reported federal officials had linked the produce distributor to the provider, which distributes to restaurants, including Taco Bell.
10 TV's Kevin Landers looked into the connection between the restaurant chain and its lettuce supplier.
I spoke to an attorney who has sued food suppliers in similar cases involving foodborne illnesses. He says so far 50 people, including one man from Ohio, have hired him to sue both Taco Bell and Taylor Farms for making them sick.
What did you get from Taco Bell today?
I got a cheesy gordita crunch.
As Andreas Garcia dug into his Taco Bell bag to show us his food, he told us he had not heard about the widespread outbreak of diarrhea-causing parasite Cyclospora from lettuce served at Taco Bell. People around the country have been getting spontaneous diarrhea because of the lettuce that Taco Bell has used.
Oh, geez. Now I'm concerned.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention late Thursday warned consumers not to eat shredded iceberg lettuce from Taco Bell restaurants in Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia.
I'll probably get the lettuce off the gordita, and the bean burrito doesn't have lettuce, so that should be safe.
Bill Marler, a food safety lawyer, believes a lack of federal investigators to test water at farms is partly to blame.
Cyclospora is a human fecal pathogen. This does not come from cow manure, doesn't come from birds, it comes from humans. So somehow, some way, human feces got in, most likely to the water supply.
He says Taco Bell and Taylor Farms have a history of outbreaks involving E. coli and salmonella, sickening and hospitalizing customers who ate lettuce and celery and onion mix. Federal investigators have not yet identified the exact source of the contamination.
We have not seen an outbreak of this size in the U.S. ever, right? So there's always new ways that these microorganisms outsmart us.
Sonia Illich is a professor of food safety at Ohio State. She says it's not a surprise raw produce is the source.
Fresh produce is probably one commodity causes the majority, or almost half, of all the foodborne diseases.
Taco Bell says it's voluntarily removed potentially impacted lettuce from its supplier in selected states. Reporting in Grandview, Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
That poor guy interviewed by the reporter just as he was about to enjoy his Taco Bell. Hey, did you hear that might give you violent diarrhea? That poor guy. Oh no, I didn't hear about that. Whoa, ooh, now I'm a little bit sketchy about eating this. You should have told me before I came out of the Taco Bell. Told me before I went in, sir. Thank you. Now, Thursday this week, Donald Trump was scheduled to give what was classified as a major announcement, and there was speculation that it involved the 2020 election and China, and to some degree it did. It did not necessarily directly involve the results of the 2020 election. However, some of the news coverage implied that it was somewhat of a repeat of the allegations that Donald Trump made during the 2020 election.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening. This data loss presents an unprecedented election security nightmare. The intelligence even shows that China assigned a data exploitation unit specifically to this new project. Compounding the travesty, the second set of documents we are releasing reveals that members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency work to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling, covering it up from both the president and the American people like nobody thought was possible. U.S. spy agencies began learning about the compromise of voter registration files in 2020 when they discovered that tens of millions of voter data, think of that, tens of millions of voters' data in 18 states have been bought, stolen, or hacked by China. Yet those responsible for sounding the alarm instead kept the information secret and hidden. They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country, a standard, very pat line that was divvied out to say. The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his re-election. Isn't that nice? Also, in mid-2018, China was working to influence the results of the U.S. midterm elections and later the results of the 2020 presidential election itself. Separately, in mid-2019, the Chinese government's strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job, and they did everything possible to do exactly that. Going on, this document says, and this is by the CIA, the strategy included efforts to use Chinese contacts with big U.S. companies to influence U.S. business leaders to turn against the President of the United States of America. The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them large sums of money to write more negative articles about him, as many as they could, and they didn't care what they said. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charged them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs, and built the strongest military anywhere in the world. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world. These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review, but it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political. Recently, we found significant numbers of burn bags in formation, and this is a group of bags that were used to destroy information given by President Barack Hussein Obama to be burned. It was supposed to be burned. These bags were supposed to be at a different level by different people, incinerated and checked, but it never happened. Maybe we got lucky. We believe this was not done on purpose, but rather through gross incompetence of the people that was supposed to burn the bags. But the findings are stunning. Today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, to fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. Yet concealing China's meddling was only the beginning. The third set of documents we are releasing proves that for many years, Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems. Dishonest, almost all. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that. Tonight, we're publishing a series of previously classified U.S. intelligence community assessments and other reports proving that our government has long known these machines are extremely exposed to attack. As one assessment states, we judge that the United States adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure. That's unquote, but that's some statement, isn't it? Made by supposedly great patriots of our country. The document goes on to further state that, quote, we assess that centralized election-related data repositories, such as voter registration databases, poll books, and other official election websites, are most vulnerable to exploitation, and adversaries could use this access to these systems to disrupt election processes within the United States of America. Tonight, we're releasing all of those findings, and spanning from January 2020 to June 2026, this is a cyber threat aimed at the very heart of our democracy. Many people have questioned whether it could actually be possible to electronically manipulate vote totals or change election results on these terrible machines. Today, we are releasing documents that show the CIA obtained reporting of a specific plot to do a big number in favor of the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela. And that's exactly what happened, conspiring to digitally rig their own country's elections in 2020, and that's what they did. This reporting included precise details about methods to regime develop to digitally alter vote totals in ways that could not be detected even with an audit, no matter how deep they went. This intelligence underscores why we must take urgent action to ensure that our own system can never, ever be hacked or compromised like it was in the past. The fourth set of documents reveals that even when significant evidence of fraud has been detected, it has been buried and covered up. Among the disclosures tonight are FBI files detailing evidence of alleged fraud by a large-scale voter registration operation in Michigan. In 2020, Michigan State Police raided a Democrat Get Out the Vote organization, corrupt group in Muskegon. And we're so concerned by what they found. They were just so concerned, they couldn't believe it, actually, that they contacted the FBI in Detroit. The documents state that some canvassers admitted to FBI agents that they signed voter registration forms in other people's names, submitted fraudulent registration for people who did not exist, and received gift cards tied to their number of applications that they produced. In other words, it was pay, play, and cheat. The FBI agents working on the case believe that crimes were committed, yet the Biden Department of Justice slow-walked the investigation and killed it. Tonight, I'm asking the FBI director to ensure that the matter is fully investigated and to work with the Department of Justice to prosecute those responsible for any crimes. Finally, to reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the...
So the president gave that speech on Thursday, and in general, he did not say that any of the things that they have learned / are declassifying suggest that if you retallied the votes, he would have won the 2020 election and would have been president. But there are many allegations, some of which echo some of the claims that were being made during 2020, such as China having access to be able to produce fraudulent ballots in some locations. That was an allegation that was made during 2020 that, according to the claimed release of declassified documents, has some truth to it. Now, in his statement, he didn't mention whether or not those ballots were successfully submitted, if they were even produced, or it was just an attempt to produce ballots that looked official, that were able to be competent frauds. Now, ABC News and other news outlets sort of jumped the gun to downplay what the president was talking about and simply say that he was trying to repeat some of the claims of 2020.
And here in the U.S., 24 hours after President Trump delivered his primetime address, making claims about, quote, shocking vulnerabilities in America's election system and reigniting false claims about the 2020 election, a top Republican senator is dismissing the president's warnings as nothing new. Here's ABC's Jonathan Karl.
Tonight, a top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee poured cold water on President Trump's dramatic claims of, quote, shocking vulnerabilities within our country's election systems.
Frankly, as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, there wasn't a whole lot new. We've known that our adversaries are trying to influence our elections for a long time.
President Trump released newly declassified documents he claims expose those shocking vulnerabilities.
The election system we have dangerously exposes and really exposes like levels never thought possible to hacking, exploitation, and foreign interference.
But one of the election reports the White House released says America's election systems, quote, would be difficult to manipulate on a wide enough scale to alter the election outcome. Trump accused China of targeting the 2020 election, even though his own intelligence officials had assessed with high confidence that China did not seek to change the outcome. The president also made unsubstantiated claims that hundreds of thousands of non-citizens are registered to vote. Today, Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security vowed to track them down and threatened state officials who refused to help with the effort.
If the election officials, once we gave them the information they need to secure their elections, and they chose not to, then those individuals can also be held accountable by fines, by penalties, and even, depending on how far it goes, prison time.
Although the president made alarming allegations, he presented no evidence that China meddled in the 2020 election. And despite those allegations, the White House told us today that President Trump still intends to welcome Chinese President Xi here to the White House later this year. Mary?
That trip's still a go. Okay, John, thank you.
Now, there was a great attempt to associate the claims that the president made in his speech to the 2020 election itself and whether or not it would have, quote, changed the outcome, which is not something I heard him say in his long speech. He did not declare it would have changed the outcome, yet the perspective that ABC News pushed forward was that his claims were directly declaring that the outcome would have been different, and they were downplaying his claims and the information in the released documents along those lines. The problem comes from the fact that the claims themselves were not specifically disputed by ABC News, and they were only downplayed in the sense of the claim that it wouldn't have changed the outcome. Now, the declassified information is what they call evidence in layman's terms, yet Jonathan Karl at the end there says that the president did this without evidence, even though his entire speech was coinciding with a document release dump. Now on CBS, they interviewed John Solomon, who runs the news outlet Just the News, who's actually a principal player in this document declassification story, as he was given a unique role inside of the White House that he will explain.
Conservative journalist John Solomon. He is an advisor to the president, to President Trump. He's leading a government transparency task force for the White House. He's also the man behind a lot of the research and the reporting that the president cited as true in this speech tonight. John, you heard the president. You also heard the senator say none of it is true or not new or not significant, and others have said that as well. Your response?
Well, listen, I talked to the intelligence chiefs in the last few days as we got prepared for this. It's very important to understand, the president said this tonight, every intelligence chief vetted this speech. They made sure it was accurate. They told me they had never been briefed on the size of the breaches, the 230 million Americans, the 220 million Americans whose data was stolen, that they consider it a security breach. How many times on your network have you reported that 5 countries are capable of hacking our election machines? When is the last time you reported that Venezuela actually succeeded in breaching a machine which has implications for our future security? You haven't, because it was never made public. It has not been made to Congress. It has not been told to the president in the past. We checked the presidential daily briefs. A president was kept from this information. Now we have a chance to fix a glass chin of election security, make the 26th election more secure than the last 3.
John, did the president, in his address tonight, we know he likes to ad-lib, did he overstep the information that you provided to him in any way, shape, or form?
Not that I've seen. I mean, I have to go back and compare everything, but no, I think the president stayed right where the intelligence community gave us this information, where it resides, and that is, we had a glass chin. We knew our election machines are vulnerable. We didn't patch them. We knew 230 million Americans' voter data was stolen by Chinese spies. Now think about this. When Equifax had the 147 million person breach 10 years ago, it was one of the biggest stories, one of the biggest data breaches. This is larger than that. A foreign enemy has the ability now to register American voters, and that is something that concerned the Intelligence Committee. Thousands of pages of reports that we went through. We put several hundred of them out tonight. But if all of us are worried about when our bank account gets compromised, we should be just as worried when our voter file gets compromised, because it may affect a future election.
So what's the president's next move here tonight?
He laid out several steps. One of them is for tomorrow, the Homeland Security Secretary to begin briefing reporters at the White House on what the machine fixes are. Patches, very simple things that will fix those machines. By the way, the first people to raise concerns about the very patches we're talking about, 2 Democratic senators back in 2019. But these are going to get fixed now, 7 years later. The second thing is the Homeland Security Department needs to figure out what to do to make sure we can deal with this identity theft, so that when people vote, they are the person they say they are, and some foreigner hasn't monkeyed with the system. And then third, he made very clear, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, they have to go back and find out why the intelligence analysts kept this from a president, kept this from a Congress, kept this from the American people. I have found no evidence in all the documents the Intelligence Committee gave me that people like Senator Mark Warner knew about this. Now, if he knew about it, maybe he should have told us earlier.
But John, the voting rolls that China has allegedly compromised, they are public rolls. That's the information.
No, they're not all.
They're not all. Okay.
Not.
So then tell me this.
No, they're not.
What could China potentially do? Because this is the headline that comes out of this tonight. 220 million compromised voter rolls. What can China potentially do, from your understanding, with that information?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tony. When your reporters look at the National Intelligence Council assessment from January of 2020, there are 6 things it was assessed. This means all the intelligence community agrees together. 6 things they can do. They can vote in your name, and you would show up one day and you wouldn't be able to vote because they'll tell you someone else voted for you. They could register you in another location. You would never know that they voted for you in another location because they have all your data, everything they need to fill out a legitimate registration form. They could go and change something on your address, and when you showed up with your ballot or with your ID, it's like, oh, you're not that person. You're registered at another address. All of those things were imagined by our intelligence community. They warned about it. They called it the softest of vulnerabilities, the most severe vulnerabilities our system had. It gets hacked, and then they don't tell any of us. You know, we get informed when our bank accounts are taken. Why shouldn't we get informed when our voter records are taken?
Well, we're getting informed tonight. John, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're in our closing minutes here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, interestingly enough, if you caught some oddities in the way that the newscaster presented some of the situation to John Solomon, he said none of these claims are true or new or significant. Now, those are all different things. So either none of them are true, in which case, you know, the newness of the claim is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether it was a new false claim or an old false claim if they're not true. The idea that they're not significant is strange, because people wouldn't be particularly interested in any of the claims if they didn't feel at least that they were significant in some degree. They could be wrong. Something could be stated, overstated, and its impact overstated and it not be significant. But that wasn't what it, you know, the insinuation here, because again, it's alleged that none of them are true. So you have to sort of either pick which ones are not true, which ones are not new, and which ones are not significant. Now, new and insignificant could be together, but not the not true, not new, and not insignificant. You can't have all three for all of the claims. So anyway, the 2020 election fiasco had several interesting things to note, where you couldn't necessarily, if you were paying attention to everyone's arguments, pick a particular side that was being the most truthful. The Biden administration's claim that it was the Trump administration, but the officials in the CISA department declaring that it was the most secure election in history, U.S. history, did so within 24 hours of the election, making that declaration. Now, it is impossible to know exactly the security situation across the entire country within a 24-hour period to be able to declare that it was, quote, the safest in history. That is absurd. So anyone who takes the statement, it was the most secure election in U.S. history, that came immediately after the election, had to have understood that that was just a posturing. It wasn't an actual legitimate claim done after significant analysis. And anyone who knows about network security or any type of security in sort of inside of information systems or processes knows that you can have something that is secure, but it comes at a cost of cataloging threats thwarted. You don't just simply have something that's safe with no attacks. You have attacks that you thwarted. And there were no instances during that time period that anyone talked about attempts for malfeasance that were thwarted. That was another tell that side declaring that it was, you know, a perfectly spotless election with no problems, was more posturing than it was giving you accurate information. Now, that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, if you were to have full omniscience and know everything that happened inside of the election, that the votes would have gone for Donald Trump in the according to the Electoral College standard, and that he would have been the president again, and we wouldn't have had sleepy Joe Biden. But still, both sides were sort of posturing. The side that was declaring that the entire thing was rigged and that Donald Trump actually won had no way of knowing that Donald Trump actually won, because they hadn't conducted the full investigation to determine the actual legitimate outcome. And the side that was declaring it was the safest election of all time was posturing, because they said that without specifying a single thwarted threat to manipulate anything, which, again, if you are in any sort of security research, you always are having threats. You are just thwarting them. You have, if you're talking about a computer network, you have people who are attempting to infiltrate, attempting to shut down the network, attempting to get past your security, and you have incidences where you have stopped them. It is someone calling your support people and pretending to be from IT and trying to get passwords they're not supposed to have. Those attempts are made all day and every day by bad actors against companies, against the government, against every type of legitimate organization that you possibly have. And if your network guy, if your security guy comes to you and says, oh, nobody attempted to do anything at all and we didn't have anything to thwart, that guy should be fired immediately, because that means he's not discovering all of the attacks that are actually happening on your system. But if they come back to you and say, oh, there were 10,000 attacks that we thwarted, they were all very minor, there was one major one that was at risk, but we took care of that as well, then you understand that person probably is being honest with you and has a handle on the situation. But if nobody attempted to do anything and there was nothing to thwart, you're being lied to. Now, John Solomon specified that a lot of these details inside of the reporting that was being done, where they were saying that nothing was new, nothing was important, and so what if they have voter rolls? These are public voter rolls. If they have non-public information, it's quite interesting that the news is downplaying this, since recently the news was hyping up the idea that the U.S. government, Donald Trump's administration, getting these same voter rolls was a problem, that he would be able to weaponize this information and affect election outcomes in the future through manipulation. So these are the same types of sensitive pieces of data that the news was just recently reporting is dangerous for Trump to get his hands on in the executive, but they're immediately downplaying potential sources that were non-public information, things that were not necessarily able to be reached by almost anyone, that in China having access to these types of things is no big deal and everyone needs to just quit talking about it, is a very preposterous proposal. Now, moving on from that, the White House teleprompter operator placed on leave after betting on Trump speeches. Washington Post. A White House teleprompter operator who was placing online bets related to President Donald Trump's public remarks has been placed on unpaid leave. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt confirmed on Thursday that the president placed a staffer on leave and that the person is complying with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. The operator placed the trades on Kalshi, the online prediction market platform, the company confirmed. Robert Denault, the head of enforcement at Kalshi, said in a statement that the company's surveillance team promptly flagged and referred these trades to the CFTC after an exchange investigation. The White House staffer's irregular trades were flagged by Kalshi in March, according to the company. The company said bets were placed on common words in Trump's speeches and that they did not appear to be particularly sensitive topics. Kalshi's surveillance analysts subsequently discovered the account holder was employed by the federal government and was a teleprompter operator. His account, which had over $90,000 in profits, was then frozen, and an investigation which included interviewing the staffer ensued. Betting on the outcome of political or government actions is a booming industry. In January, Kalshi told the Washington Post that the company had some $129 million at stake in political markets. Trump, who famously owned a casino in Atlantic City, said in April that he wasn't much of a fan of prediction markets, but he seemed to quickly change his tune, telling reporters less than a week later that he knows some people who are very smart and they like it. The probe into the White House staffer marks the latest in a growing number of prosecutorial efforts against politicians and government employees placing online wagers that appear to be based on privileged information. In April, federal authorities charged special forces soldier involved in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro with using inside information about the raid to win roughly $400,000 through bets placed online in online prediction markets. Also that month, 3 congressional candidates were fined and suspended from Kalshi for waging on the outcome of their own elections. The Trump administration has broadly embraced online sports betting and prediction markets. The company logos were emblazoned on the octagon used in the UFC fight held on the White House grounds, and the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., advises Kalshi and Polymarket. Now, there's some additional items with respect to sort of gambling and the broadening spectrum of cryptocurrencies and prediction markets that have been embroiling the president in some controversy lately, including what is alleged to have been Donald Trump's own pump and dump scheme with Trump coin. I'm not 100% familiar with the world of Trump-related meme coin assets, so I don't know who purchased Trump coin, who was affected by a Trump pump and dump. All I can say is that if you were unfortunately one of the people who thought Trump coin was an actual investment and not just a random pump and dump play, caveat emptor next time when you have Donald J. Trump offering you some sort of fancy thing to buy that really doesn't have any external use other than just buying the Trump name on the asset. Now, moving forward here, social media influencers Andrew and Tristan Tate arrested in Miami, U.S. Marshal Service tells AP. Influencer brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate, whose social media empire promoting wealth, male dominance, and misogyny has made them among the world's most polarizing internet personalities, were arrested Saturday in Miami as British authorities sought their extradition on rape and sex trafficking charges. The brothers were taken into custody by the U.S. Marshal Service on a sealed warrant, agency spokesperson Brady McCarran told the Associated Press, placing the United States at the center of an international saga and has stretched from Romania to Britain. British prosecutors announced Saturday that they were seeking the brothers' extradition on charges alleging they raped and trafficked women between 2010 and 2017. The dual U.S. and British citizens moved to Romania in 2016. They were arrested there in 2022, accused of participating in schemes to lure women for sexual exploitation. They denied those allegations, and the case didn't go forward because of legal and procedural irregularities. The brothers are expecting to appear in Miami's federal court early next week, according to a person familiar with the matter who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive law enforcement operations. The pending charges in the United Kingdom accuse the brothers of abusing women in an area north of London where they grew up. Their lawyers had said they denied the allegations. Joseph McBride, an attorney representing the Tate brothers, said in a phone interview Saturday evening that he has not been able to speak with his clients, but called the new charges out of the UK filth and slander intended to derail defamation lawsuits filed by the brothers in the US. They're pulling out all the stops to make sure these guys never get their day in court, McBride said. We are confident that once a competent judge sees the facts and once the Department of Justice confronts this egregious abuse of its own authority, Andrew and Tristan Tate will walk free. America does not do Britain's political dirty work. Andrew Tate, 39, first reached a mainstream audience as a contestant on the UK reality television show Big Brother in 2016. He was removed from the show when a video surfaced that appeared to show Tate assaulting a woman. He and his brother Tristan Tate, 38, are vocal supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump. Andrew Tate has amassed over 10 million followers on X, but he has been banned from other platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram for violating hate speech guidelines. His most widely condemned rhetoric includes comments that women who are sexually assaulted should bear some responsibility for their attacks, graphic descriptions of how he might attack women, and criticisms of people who seek treatment for mental illness. The Tate brothers have consistently denied allegations of abuse and human trafficking, claiming that violent and misogynistic statements have been taken out of context or were intended as jokes. And from the BBC, Tate brothers arrested in the U.S. as further UK charges take total to 59. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan have been arrested in the U.S. after British authorities issued 38 new charges against the pair. The UK Crown's prosecutorial service said Andrew was being charged with 7 further counts of rape, as well as charges relating to sex trafficking and indecent images of a child. Tristan's charges include 2 counts of rape and 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking or sexual exploitation. The total number of charges against the brothers is now 59, Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire police said. The alleged offending is said to have taken place between July 2010 and August 2017. The Tates have previously denied any wrongdoing. Following their arrest, prosecutors will begin legal proceeding to extradite the brothers, who are dual British U.S. citizens, to the UK, the CPS said. These, quote, these charging decisions followed receipt of a further file of evidence from Bedfordshire police and bring the total number of alleged victims in this case to 7, Malcolm McCaff, head of the Special Crimes Division at CPS, said. Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire police have been investigating a number of offenses in what it called a complex investigation. As a result, 38 new charges were authorized against the brothers, meaning Andrew, 39, faces a total of 42 charges in the UK, and Tristan, 37, faces 17. The U.S. Marshals confirmed to the BBC that the Tates had been taken into custody, while a U.S. Department of Justice spokesperson said the arrests were pursuant to extradition proceedings. A lawyer who represents the Tates, Joseph McBride, said, quote, "The world knows Andrew and Tristan are innocent," in a statement released after their arrest on Saturday evening. And this is a This Dumb Week fact check. That is a false statement. The world itself does not know Andrew and Tristan are innocent. In particular, your host here does not know that they are innocent, and in fact has suspicions that they may not be so innocent as alleged. Quote, "Their enemies know it best of all. That is exactly why they have been attacked," McBride continued, describing the new UK charges as a political hit. He said the new charges were designed to counter a defamation action filed by the brothers in the US. Quote, "We are confident that once a competent judge sees the facts, and once the Department of Justice confronts this egregious abuse of its own authority, Andrew and Tristan Tate will walk free. America does not do Britain's political dirty work." In 2024, Bedfordshire police secured European arrest warrants for the pair to have them returned from Romania, where they are based and under a criminal investigation. In June, the brothers lost a legal bid to be told the names of their UK accusers after the CPS decided it was necessary to withhold the names after their alleged victims until legal action formally started. Lawyer Matt Jury, who represents several alleged British victims of Andrew, welcomed the charges and said, quote, "Andrew and Tristan Tate are accused of some of the most serious offenses, including multiple counts of rape and human trafficking. It is time they face justice." Now, these items here have been, some of these items here at least, have been on the stack of stuff and on the cutting room floor of This Dumb Week for many months. Actually, I've been holding for the right time to get them actually in here. I've had these items for quite a long time, but as we are always jam-packed with information, it has never actually been fully able to be inserted into the right place and time. So we will get into some of the defamation issues that they bring up here. Now, one of the people who they target for defamation lawsuits goes by the handle Mike Barr TV. It is a person out of Australia who takes a close look at Tristan and Andrew Tate's history and their businesses, records their videos and makes compilation videos alleging that they have been dishonest in interviews and with media personalities whenever they are explaining now their behavior several years ago.
Some of you may be aware, many of you probably not, that Andrew Tate has been suing me for over a year now. So last March, he launched a defamation lawsuit against me in Florida. I'm an Australian content creator. I live in Australia. He lives in Romania, but he decided he'd sue me in Florida for defamation. Now, the question is, why is Top G, someone who proclaims to be the pinnacle of masculinity, suing some small-time Australian content creator? Well, that's because for over 2 years, I successfully exposed Andrew Tate by telling the truth. And I did that by using his own footage. He saw me as such a threat, and this is his attempt to get revenge for that work that I did. That was very prominently seen, featured a lot of different podcasts and shows, and many of the videos went viral.
That's how it goes. Slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up, bitch, sex. These are the basic moves of pimp.
Okay. Credit to Milk Bar TV for putting together that montage.
When you're pimping like me, it's a full-time job.
And Nathan Livingstone, who's kept tabs on this, has put together a lot of these videos that we're using.
And so, yeah, for that he's suing me, and this isn't anything new. He's open about using lawfare against his critics. He proclaims to be being attacked by the Matrix and that the justice system is being weaponized against him. But he's openly bragged about using lawfare against his critics, and he's very, very petty about that.
Still say this: I don't need a reason. You're going to have to defend yourself, regardless. That's the thing about the American legal system. You cannot ignore it. I don't care if it costs me $1 million to take $1,000 out of your bank. You're going to be in court twice a month for the rest of your human years. I don't care. I will sue you for any and every reason forever. And you're going to have to hire lawyers and turn up forever. I will do that. I'm that guy. I'm petty.
So yeah, I'm gonna sue loads of people just because I think it's funny.
Now, this case was dismissed in December, but it was dismissed without prejudice. So from December till now, the Tate brothers have been using any attempt they can to try and drag this out, because this is processes the punishment. I don't think that they ever intended to win this thing, or they thought that they could. It's entirely about trying to get revenge and make life misery for me. And thank thankfully, there's been a lot of incredibly supportive people who've contributed to the legal defense. But from December, when it was dismissed without prejudice, to now, the legal bills have kept piling up. And so looking at needing to raise another $12,000 to cover the work that's been done from then. Now, there was a court hearing this week, and the judge gave them 10 more days to try and find some good faith argument for why there is jurisdiction to sue me in Florida. So in a bit over 10 days, there'll be another hearing where hopefully this thing will be dismissed. So I'm reaching out anyone who can contribute, anyone who believes in citizen journalism, who believes in free speech, who believes that the Tate brothers are a bad force in the world, and that the truth should be allowed to be exposed without the people who are exposing it being punished by these alleged rapist human traffickers, and I believe massive net negative in the world. So I'm reaching out. If you can contribute, it would mean the world. If you can help share the fundraising link, it's givesendgo.com/free speech versus Tate. That would mean everything. So thank you so much, guys. Cheers.
Now, while there were a couple clips inside of that video of discussing the defamation lawsuit that the Milk Bar TV person had included, I'm going to play somewhat of a longer version of his compilations to demonstrate the content that he has produced that has resulted in Andrew Tate filing defamation lawsuits against him. And the threshold in the United States for someone like Andrew Tate is that he has to demonstrate, because he is considered a public figure, someone who is widely known, has a large viewer base, listener base, whatever you want to call it, and in the United States standards, his ability to fight back against defamation simply by using his speech is higher than the average individual. So his bar for defamation is a higher threshold because of his imbalanced ability to fight smears, meaning he has a microphone and people listen to him when he speaks. Therefore, someone who is defaming him in some way has to have a different set of standards than the average person. The average person does not have a wide microphone that where they know the moment they speak, people will listen to them. So defamatory language, defamatory speech can harm those individuals more so readily than someone like Andrew Tate, who has the personal ability to fight back. So that standard, that increased standard of the United States courts, is called actual malice. And malice doesn't just mean ill intent in that situation. It means that the person made false statements and knew they were false at the time and did not care. Effectively did not care, or was reckless in their speech, knowing the things that they were saying was not true. So that is the type of threshold. If a judge determines that Florida has jurisdiction over a person from a Romanian citizen and an Australian citizen, if somehow Florida says, okay, we do have jurisdiction, that is the type of threshold that Andrew Tate would have to meet to be victorious. Now, in that clip I just played with the guy discussing the lawsuit, he played a clip of Andrew Tate saying, look, I just like to sue people. I'll burn a lot of my money because I have so much of it, to just make you suffer with the significantly amount of less money you have with your legal bills. I will punish you for speaking out against me just because I'm petty like that. So the threshold you'll have to hear in this small little documentary, perhaps you can call it, from Milk Bar TV is, does this guy know what he's saying is false, or does he legitimately believe the things that he's saying about Andrew Tate?
What are you charged with? That's a really good question. I'm charged with being the head of an organized criminal group, which is in charge of recruiting girls to make TikTok videos.
They face charges which include human trafficking, rape, and forming a criminal gang to sexually exploit women.
OnlyFans is the best hustle in the world.
Are they accusing you of using violence, or?
No. They're accusing me of using the lover boy method, coercing them by being nice. I don't mention webcam.
until after I've had sex with the girl. If you're on dates and you're trying to mention it and shit, it just doesn't work. It puts them off. I'd never do that. That's disgusting. I'm not a whore. It's just not gonna work. You continue as normal, no mention of webcam. You fuck the girl. After you fuck the girl, you do the PhD test.
So yeah, on corporatetape.com I have my PhD program, and that is PhD is a pimp and hose degree that I'm
Clever.
And
Clever.
That teaches basically how I got girls, how I met girls, how I got girls to like me, how I got girls to fall in love with me to work on webcam for me.
Oh, and you're always working. Why don't you work for me so we spend more time together? Work for you doing what? So you'll have a webcam business. Oh, I don't want to do that. So okay, I know you don't want to do that, but listen, come, let's have a meeting. Let's just talk about it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Fine. But let me explain it to you properly. In fact, I'll bring one of the girls who works for me. Your bottom bitch is the one who does the selling. You don't do the selling. The girl has to hear it from a girl. And this is where your bottom bitch has to be trained. That's why I said it's so important to have a good first girl.
Because that's what I did. That was my MO, was find girls, make them love me, and make them work for me.
This girl's like, okay, well, I'll try it. Put both girls on camera together the first day, so the new girl can sit there and just sit with the other girl and get drunk. Give him a bottle of vodka.
First night that I worked for him, Andrew bought me like 5 bottles of wine. So I got completely drunk because I'd never done webcam work. So I was very, very nervous.
And that's how I got rich. So that teaches everything I know from start to finish about not only getting girls, not only obtaining them, but retaining them, because that's a completely different game as well.
And over time, I just built up this big little empire of webcam girls. At one point, I had 4 locations, 75 girls working for me. I'd take around half of the money, around 50%.
You take 50%.
Around 50%.
They thought they were on 50%. And I said that the disparity is because of taxes.
He would just pay me a flat fee of £15 an hour.
We got to the point where we had these guys falling in love with my models, serious, big time in love, right? Sending crazy money. And they were convinced they were going to meet the chick. This is almost where I kind of felt bad. Because they were like, can we meet? I've sent you $200,000.
When you look at the money that I was actually bringing in, it just doesn't even scratch the surface.
I had these guys selling their houses, life savings, loans, all of it to me. Give me it all.
I was all about trying to get paid. Like I used sex as a tool to make women love me so they'd obey me and live in my house and make me money. That's what I wanted. So I was a pimp in that sense.
Were there any other instances where there was physical abuse?
I saw him smack girls with a belt.
Some ideas? You want some ideas? That's right, lock the door, you knew I was going to beat the out of you. If you behaved, I wouldn't have to hit you, would I? You don't. Get out. You can't stay in there forever.
Once again, this is an IQ test, right? Because any guy who's bad with women would look at it and go, takes a woman beater.
I say it. Look at the camera. This is what happens if you don't listen. Look at the camera. Why are you getting hit? Why are you getting beaten? You don't listen. You. Do as I say.
Any man who's actually a G, who's been around a little bit, would look at the video and go, man, she wants that. The media machine, they'd call up ex-girlfriends and say, if you have anything bad to say about Andrew, we can pay you $50,000 for the story. And they tried very hard. They didn't find any evidence of anything.
And I had gone to the shower, I came back and I noticed I saw him raping her. And
people say, why did you in Romania? And I explain my 5 reasons. One of them is the Me Too era. They go, oh, well, you're a rapist. I say, no, I'm not a fucking rapist. But I like the idea of being able to just say, to do what I want. I like being free.
And of course, they don't go out. They're not allowed out. You stay in the house.
Because I'm not particularly, what would you say, impressed by what he's done on the sex business front. It seems to me a bit on the pimpy side, let's say.
I get called a pimp a lot, but and the reason I use the term is because I don't see it as a negative term. I see it as positively inspirational and motivating person.
She has to respect you and love you and want to work with you. And that's done through positively inspirational and motivating person.
I'm going to send you a book. It's a guy called Pimpin' Ken, who was a street pimp in the 90s, and he wrote a book, 50 Laws of the Game. And one of the laws of the game is a hoe without instruction is headed for destruction.
They're accusing me of using the lover boy method, coercing them by being nice.
Let me read you then what you have said about what you have done.
Sure.
You have said
My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, get her to fall in love with me to the point where she'd do anything I say, and then get her on webcam so we could become rich together.
I don't think that's what I personally said. I think
that's exactly what you said on your website.
No, I've never said that.
So yeah, on corporatetape.com, I have my PhD program.
I think the belief is that you were charged with human trafficking.
Yeah, that's human trafficking, because what you do is you force a girl to work against her will for financial gain. That's human trafficking. And their justification for this is that girls do TikTok. Some girls I know who they found who say they're not victims have TikTok accounts.
PhD is a pimp and hose degree that I'm...
Clever.
So videos like that and some others have Milk Bar TV being the target of an Andrew Tate defamation lawsuit. Largely, you could argue that Milk Bar TV is using Andrew Tate's own words and video evidence against him to portray him in a particular light, and that light is unflattering to Andrew Tate, as he gave an interview to Tucker Carlson saying that all he is nice, and that some girls have TikTok accounts who he knows, and that's the only thing that he's done. When if you take the other clips at face value, that's certainly not what all he's done. And so that is a lawsuit that was referenced inside of the announcement of his arrests, where his lawyer tried to say that these arrests are really just to try to make sure that his defamation lawsuits have less less legitimate grounds to work on, and that's the whole reason they exist, which is a interesting position to take. Now, this isn't the only lawsuit that Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers have put out there. In fact, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate have also sued this platform, Twitter /X, owned by Elon Musk. Now, before I get into that lawsuit to explain why he's suing the X platform, I do want to say that while a lot of the things in that previous segment were offensive to this host here, the ideas that he has hit women and tricked them into doing something they wouldn't otherwise do, which is webcam streaming their sexuality. He attempted to be more articulate than he actually is, and he added an H sound to the word coercive. He said coercive. He added an H where it doesn't belong, and I am personally offended by that, in addition to the other things that offend me in his behavior. I just needed to point that out. He said coercive. Now, the lawsuit, again in Florida, the state of Florida, that is against the X platform, is an attempt to uncover the identities of anonymous users on the X platform in order to be able to also sue them for defamation. So like the clip that I played where Milk Bar TV, the account Milk Bar TV with the owner out of Australia showing that Andrew Tate, in his own words, will sue you and waste $1 million of his own dollars just to make sure that you lose thousands of yours, and that he will punish you in the court system and sue you whether he has a legitimate claim or not. That is prospectively what he wishes to do with these anonymous users. These users are likely people of little means. So that is what he wishes to do, uncover their identities to be able to sue them for defamation. So I'm going to read from the lawsuit here against X. This was placed many months ago, probably in March, I believe. 3 individuals or entities, the Doe defendants, known only by their handles used as identification on defendant, X's social media platform, have engaged in constant harassment and defamation against plaintiffs, causing them significant financial, reputational, emotional harm over a period of several years. These Doe defendants are identified currently only by their X handles as Crayon Murders, The Real Susie Wynn, Gadget 440274447, and From the Broken Side. Additional Doe defendants include Avalon IT, Mad About Sheep, Gadget 440274447, CS Skeptic, Thoughts and Players, Usama Broad, My Real Main, Lucy Marion Brown. These Doe defendants have engaged in a conspiracy to defame and ruin the plaintiffs financially, reputationally, and emotionally through their constant and routine defamatory posts on X, specifically targeting the plaintiffs. More particularly, the Doe defendants have conspired with residents of the state of Florida to engage in a concerted and orchestrated attack upon plaintiffs and with their defamatory statements with malicious intent to cause harm to the plaintiffs. The Doe defendants continue to intentionally and recklessly accuse Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate of heinous crimes, including rape and human trafficking, as well as having sexually transmitted diseases. These accounts, utilized by the Doe defendants and or their co-conspirators, have maliciously, intentionally, and with reckless disregard for the truth come together to form a conspiracy online, in concert with others, to defame the Tate brothers, post defamatory information, influence public opinion regarding the pending cases involving the Tate brothers, and influence the outcome of any civil or criminal case. As a direct and proximate result of the defamatory statements of these Doe defendants, plaintiffs have suffered and continue to suffer damages, including irreparable harm to their reputation, as well as economic and non-economic damages, shame, embarrassment, and loss of business opportunities. Examples of the defamation and defamation per se is as follows. Now, just as a point of order here, defamation per se is a statement that in and of itself to a reasonable human being would be defamatory. And defamatory does not mean it's not true. It just means that it's defaming. It harms the person's reputation. That could be a legitimate action. The act could be a legitimate defamation. So a person who is found guilty in a court of law of murder, calling him a murderer is defamation per se, but it is also true, or at least has been adjudicated true by a court of law, and therefore is counted as true for the purposes of speech. Examples of the defamation and defamation per se is as follows. Quote, forcing women to have your sons is called rape. Quote, when Tate said he loves hitting women, he's not joking. Quote, imagine the pain of finding out your daughters aren't in college but were sex trafficked. The Tates made a point of isolating victims from their support systems. Quote, imagine having to hide from your abuser in a bathroom, probably another girl too scared and brainwashed to come forward. Quote, Tristan is quieter, more ruthless version of Andrew, has a reputation for throwing women out of their homes, including his baby mama and child. Watch the quiet ones. Quote, nothing surprises me anymore regarding top groomer. Quote, some of Andrew Tate's alleged victims describe his violent sexual assaults. Please donate to the crowdfund to help bring them to court. The authorities let them down. Quote, how many women have had lives ruined from the Tate's PhD course? And again, in Andrew's own words, the PhD course is the Pimpin' Hose degree. The main source of income of these men was pimping out partners and swapping ideas on how to lure fresh prey. I guarantee War Room members are still making a career out of the ruination of females. War Room was the title of one of the things you would get access to. I don't know if it still exists, but early on when Andrew Tate's career, so to speak, he would have paying male members take these educational seminars on that he would provide, and it would give access to a chat forum that he would call the War Room. Quote, Tate's underage parties. One tactic used by the Tates was holding parties, inviting girls of all ages, messaging minors on Instagram, grooming girls with false promises of love, wealth, and a better life. Quote, Tate back to his old game of threatening people into silence. How many more people are going to be threatened with defamation lawsuits? Is he going to come after me, Crayons, Gadget, all his critics? Typical narcissistic behavior. Attack, lie, and slander, but deny everything. Quote, Andrew Tate is threatening to sue me for defamation. Oh no, his beautiful reputation as a sex trafficker rapist has been defamed. It's called a truth defense, you cunt. See you in court. So that was an example in this Tate lawsuit of items they declare are defamation and defamation per se. And now if you take all of the clips from the previous compilation at face value, one would surmise there is an awful lot of things that come from his own words that you would be able to use to establish that you are speaking the truth as you understand it, and would not be held to would not meet the standard of actual malice, where you know these things to actually be not true, and yet you are still saying them. Now, again, an average human being does not have a spare several $1,000s, which could be in the tens of thousands of dollars, to hire adequate representation to defend themselves in court against what would otherwise be a potentially frivolous lawsuit filed by someone who says that they would gladly spend $1 million just to punish someone who has upset them. So that is something that was on the cutting room floor for many, many weeks that I wanted to get actually out in the open here. That is something that I've had on my radar for quite a long time. The Tate's defamation lawsuits the defamation lawsuits and the uncovering lawsuit against X. Now, moving forward to another situation involving an alleged rapist, the Maine Democrat primary is in somewhat of a speed run to replace the ousted candidate Graham Plattner, who resigned from his campaigning about 2 weeks ago after allegations that in a drunken stupor, he invited himself into someone's house against their will and then subsequently raped them. There is a speed primary that is being undergone that has had candidates attempting to fill his place before the November election. They have a very little time to do this. I don't know exactly how much time they have left, but one such candidate, Ashley Webb, introduced herself in one of the maybe first or only debates for this sort of shotgun wedding Senate primary race for the Democrats to replace Graham Plattner. Ashley Webb introduced herself and was asked the question, what makes you worthy of running for Senate?
You have to serve in the U.S. Senate.
Oh, I ran for office several times. Didn't win, but I did run. And then I'm a songwriter, and then I write my own books. And then I suppose my transparency, I wouldn't lie to the people, and I wouldn't deceive the people like we're being deceived right now. Like, we get lied to, smoke and mirrors, like what's going on with ICE, pretending like these victims did something wrong. Like, that's unacceptable. And I suppose the biggest thing is, like, I'm just an angry citizen now, and if I got elected, I'd be an angry senator, and I think that would probably be their worst nightmare.
David Costello.
Therefore, Ashley Webb has declared her, and I'm putting her with an asterisk, qualifications to run for Senate is that she writes her own songs and books, which is aims to be seen whether or not the quality of said songs and books is worthy of holding Senate office. But Ashley Webb is a trans female, and let's say their physical aesthetic begs for some work. They on stage, of course, you are under hot lights, so perhaps everyone can be forgiven for a little bit of sweaty nature. However, visually speaking, I would say that I would anticipate that this person, Ashley Webb, did have a bit of a stench coming off of her, just based off of the way that she was carrying herself physically. Now, Colin Wright, friend of the show, personal friend of mine, at Reality's Last Stand, did a little bit of additional investigation and wrote, male Senate candidate Ashley Webb says he ovulates and menstruates through his colon. Ashley Webb, a man who identifies as a woman and is running for the United States Senate in Maine in the wake of Graham Plattner's sudden withdrawal, went viral recently for promising that he would never lie to or deceive the public. The remark struck many viewers as ironic, given that Webb made it while wearing a dress, presenting himself as a woman and expecting voters to address him as one. But I think the more important question is not whether Webb is consciously deceiving anyone. While honesty and transparency are important, being sincere in one's beliefs is not the same as possessing a sound and reasonable mind. A person can hold genuine beliefs that are widely detached from reality. Webb's online public record reveals that his tether to reality is, at best, alarmingly tenuous, and I believe having a firm grasp of reality should not be viewed as optional for someone seeking most of the powerful offices in this country. Webb identifies not only as transgender, but also as intersex. Earlier this month, he announced his run for the Democratic nomination in a post running openly as trans intersex candidate for Senate in Maine. The account's comment history contains some truly extraordinary claims. Webb claims to ovulate. Webb also claims to experience a monthly period that began when he was 25. However, because Webb was born with, quote, external male parts rather than the proper hole, end quote, the supposed menstrual blood cannot leave through a vagina. Instead, Webb believes that a hidden female reproductive tract formed a, quote, exit connection with his colon, causing monthly rectal bleeding. Quote, when you don't have the proper hole, it finds one of two exits, Webb wrote. Quote, my exit connection was made with my colon, because when I get this monthly pain, that is where the blood comes out of. Webb has not given any anatomical evidence for this claim. According to his other posts, colonoscopies have not found any such connection, while repeated CT scans have failed to reveal a uterus or ovaries. Webb does not view these negative findings as evidence against his hypothesis that he's actually female. Instead, Webb claims the CT scans can't find a uterus and ovaries when they enter your gender as male, because doctors supposedly, quote, use a different scanning process for females. But that's not how abdominal and pelvic CT imaging works. A uterus does not become invisible on a CT scan because the patient is simply listed as male. And rectal bleeding is not a form of menstruation. Menstruation occurs when the uterine lining breaks down and blood and tissue pass from the uterus through the cervix and vagina. Ovulation occurs when an ovary releases an egg. For the blood coming out of Webb's anus to be menstrual blood, he would need functioning ovaries, a uterus capable of cycling and shedding, and some abnormal passage connecting the reproductive tract to his colon. Those are not conclusions that can be drawn from abdominal pain and rectal bleeding. Such claims are, frankly, insane. Webb also posted an image that's supposedly one of his CT scans. He falsely claimed to be 5'6", 26-year-old female. He's 6'1", 40, and male. He asked other Reddit users whether his ovaries looked normal and simply marked objects on the scan that he believed to be his ovaries. He said he, quote, just wanted to make sure nothing was wrong with his ovaries because he, quote, wants to be a mom. Webb also makes bizarre claims about his chromosomes in multiple posts. Webb says that a karyotype test came back as XY, that of a typical male. Webb also says he was recorded male at birth. Nevertheless, Webb has written, pretty positive, I'm the XX type. That claim is impossible to reconcile with Webb's own description of his body. He reports typical male external genitalia and a pre-treatment testosterone level within normal male range, indicating functioning testes. Webb is therefore not merely suggesting that he has an obscure chromosomal variation. He appears to believe that he has two fully functioning testes alongside two fully functioning ovaries, and in addition a uterus capable of menstruation. Webb's apparent claim of possessing complete and functional male and female reproductive systems has never been observed in humans, and given the realities of how sexual development occurs, it never will be. In the posts I reviewed, Webb did not cite any DSD diagnosis. To the contrary, Webb wrote, I am trying to get diagnosed, and elsewhere said that the proper tests were still being conducted to confirm his belief. In other words, Webb's claim of being intersex is a self-diagnosis. The only real evidence Webb offers is an estrogen panel. Quote, I have both estrogen 1 and estrogen 2 tested, Webb wrote. Quote, my estrogen 1 was 59 pmgl and estrogen 2 was 44 pmgl. My total estrogen is 280 ml. From this, Webb concluded, doctors say I'm male, but I'm pretty certain I am female, and the doctors are wrong. These results appear to correspond to LabCorp's assays, and they don't show what Webb thinks they show. Estrone, or E1, is a relatively weak estrogen in terms of feminizing abilities. LabCorp lists its adult male reference range as 0 to 174 pg/ml. Webb's reported E1 level of 59 was therefore entirely within the male range. Estradiol, or E2, is the main estrogen associated with the female reproductive cycle and the one most relevant to feminizing effects. LabCorp's standard adult male range is 7.6 to 42.6 pg/ml. Webb's E2 of 44 was just 1.4 pg/ml above the upper limit. Webb's total estrogen result of 280 pgml was elevated relative to LabCorp's male range of 56 to 213. The number also falls within LabCorp's broad reference intervals for premenopausal women, but that does not mean Webb has or had any typically female endocrine profile. Total estrogens is a broad measurement that does not tell us whether the most biologically relevant estrogens are in the female typical range, nor does it negate the separate E1 and E2 results. There is substantial overlap between the lower end of female estrogen reference ranges and the upper end of male ranges. As a result, a result's appearance somewhere in the broad female range does not make it uniquely female. Webb's pattern of reasoning is troubling, to say the least. For Webb, every piece of confirming information is accepted, while every piece of disconfirming information is ignored or explained away. Webb is asking to become one of 100 people entrusted to making high-level decisions about war, spending, public health, and constitutional rights. Those duties require the ability to distinguish delusion from reality. Webb has demonstrated a complete inability to make that distinction. So thank you, Colin Wright, a personal friend and friend of the show, for doing that investigation so that nobody else had to. And good luck, Maine, for your your ragtag cast of characters there. I wish you well and hope you find a good Senate candidate. Now, Ashley Webb might have been a little bit of amusing in her presentation on that shotgun Senate debate or Senate primary debate hosted on local TV news. Might have been entertaining in saying that her ability to run for Senate, or the reason that she was eligible to run for Senate, was that she wrote her own books and songs. Reminds me of one of my favorite candidates of all time, who once ran for governor of Tennessee back in 2010. This man's name is Basil Marceau, and he gave one of the most unique introductions of anyone in human history on that debate stage.
All right, well, all this week, Channel 4 is working for you to help you make a choice in the governor's primary race.
As part of that commitment, we have given all 5 candidates from the 2 major parties time during our news to let you know where they stand in their own words about the topics of their choosing.
That's right, and the order was chosen by random drawing tonight. We hear from Basil Marceau.
I'm BasilMarceau.com, the Republican candidate for governor. I'd like to recall all permit and registration for guns. Everyone can carry guns. If you kill someone, you get murdered. You go to jail. And I like to plant grass or vegetation across the state with any vacant lot and sell it for gas so we can use it for our expenses. Also, I'm going to remove all gold fringe flags from the state and apply the real flag with 3 stripes. I also want to stop traffic stops. Set it up like the Supreme Court ruled in Knowles versus Iowa. You can't find evidence in a car, you can't look. I want you all to vote for Basil Marceau. I want you to say the Pledge of Allegiance to a Republic in the morning when you come out. And we all pray to God and say amen. And everyone have a nice day. And I see you all at the polls. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Now, perhaps you're thinking, well, listen, Basil sounded a little bit nervous. It is a little bit nerve-wracking when you're just an average citizen trying to do your civic duty and maybe put your hat in the ring running for governor. You know, you're out of your element. You are not suave. You are not savvy. You are not a public speaker, and you are now on local television, blasted statewide, and this is your first introduction. You're just nervous. Well, what I would like to do next is just give you one of Basil Marceau's 2010 campaign ads where you can perhaps determine whether it was Basil or his on-screen nerves when broadcasted live.
Hello, citizens. This is BasilMarceau.com. I'm your Republican candidate for governor of Tennessee. I want you to put me in this building, the Capitol behind me here, so I can do my issues and make you all more freer than you were yesterday. When I become your governor, I'm going to move the capital to Chattanooga, Tennessee, at the State Building where Don Sundquist held his temporary office, so I can clean house and get rid of all the backroom politics that ruined our politics program in Tennessee. I'll probably take a year or two. So, I want you all to vote for me. Let me clean house. If you vote for me, I won't take any campaign contributions. I'd rather lose than take campaign contributions. So you know I won't be bought and sold. And your rights will be protected for eternity, even if I have to write it in blood. And I want you to vote for me. And I'll see you all at the polls. I would also plant vegetation on all vacant lots that they take from us when we build roads, and plant and turn it into ethanol and cash it in for gas or money. Then I also stop traffic stops, make judges listen to the oath, make the flag fly right, remove the goldfinch flag from our society. And once again, I ask you all to vote for me. Pledge allegiance to the flag on the day you come to vote. And pray to my Maker, the Lord Jesus Christ, and my Savior. Have a nice day. BasilMarceau.com.
Now, I regret to inform you that Basil Marceau did not win his race for governor of Tennessee. He never did achieve the highs that perhaps he thought he was destined, but Basil Marceau will always forever be my favorite tiny little flash in the pan candidate from the heydays of 2010. I don't know if we'll ever have a wonderfully bizarre candidate again of that caliber. I don't know if Ashley Webb will make any traction in Maine, but perhaps she will make some, and we'll have some nice campaign ads to look forward to in our future. Moving on from politics, we're going to get into the tech sector now. T-Mobile bungled forced plan migration, canceling some users' free lines. T-Mobile canceled some longtime subscribers' free line promotions as part of a forced migration to new rate plans, spurring complaints from customers yesterday. T-Mobile admitted the problem and blamed it on technical errors and is trying to fix. The forced plan changes were controversial to begin with, particularly as many longtime users are being hit with price hikes of $6 per line. The unexpected loss of free lines for some of those users could raise prices by a much higher amount if the change isn't reversed. There is good news, though. T-Mobile told Ars Technica today that it was a mistake and that the company is working to fix the problem. Of course, it's not always easy for telecom customers to get the proper resolution even after a company admits to an error publicly. But given T-Mobile's statement today, we hope the firm will fix the problem for all impacted customers with as little hassle as possible. Quote, "Our priority is to ensure customers keep the promotions, credits, and benefits of their current plan," T-Mobile told Ars today. "I've identified technical issues affecting a very small number of customers and are working quickly to correct them. For some of those customers, free line promotions were not reflected correctly following migration due to a delay in applying promotional discounts. Those free lines remain free, and we're restoring the discounts, backdating them where needed, and reprocessing accounts to ensure customers receive the benefits they were promised." T-Mobile acknowledged that this isn't the only billing problem related to its mass migration of plans. Quote, "We're also investigating reports that some people were incorrectly billed for Hulu following migration and are actively working to identify the cause. We apologize for the confusion and will make it right for our customers," T-Mobile said. T-Mobile recently announced it would eliminate its older plans and automatically move customers to different rate plans that are more or less equivalent in price and features. Quote, "Some customers will see no change to their monthly bill, while some will see a modest adjustment," T-Mobile told media outlets in late June. Quote, "Every customer moved to a new plan will keep their current benefits while gaining improvements in network and service experiences." The promise that customers would, quote, "keep their current benefits" was broken, according to people who say free lines were removed from their accounts. In addition to complaints on Reddit, the Mobile Report news site wrote today that it heard directly from a few users who said their free lines were not migrated to the new plans. Besides the elimination of free lines, another problem, quote, "that some customers are seeing as a mysterious extra hotspot data add-on on their new plans, adding as much as $15 to monthly bills," the Mobile Report wrote. T-Mobile told Ars Technica, "We do not add paid features without customer consent, and we're investigating these reports and will ensure we make it right." Some customers may have previously had hotspot data add-ons, which they are choosing to remove since hotspot capabilities are built into the new plans. T-Mobile handed out free lines at various times through promotions that let paying customers add another phone line to their accounts at no additional charge. During a March 2025 promotion, for example, customers who had kept their accounts active for at least 10 years could obtain a free line if they already had at least 2 paid lines. Some users apparently accumulated a bunch of the free lines during their long tenure as T-Mobile customers. In a Reddit post yesterday, one said they previously had paid 3 paid lines and 6 free ones for about $50 a month. Quote, just received my first bill today after being migrated to the Experience Signature, and bill is greater than $300. The bill breakdown did not include any free lines carried over, the post said. Experience Signature is one of the plans that T-Mobile is automatically applying to the accounts of customers on retired plans. Another person who reported losing free line promotions said it resulted in a $200 increase in one bill. One person said they contacted T-Mobile support about the loss of free lines, and the support rep was unable to restore it. Quote, one free line was invalidated because it was apparently ineligible with the current plan. They gave me a year's worth of credit for that one line and said, sorry, they couldn't do anything else. Now, I'm particularly astounded by the person with an exceptional number of free lines. I think, what was the number of free lines that gentleman said he had? Was it something like 6? Like it's an awful lot of, yeah. In a Reddit post yesterday, one said they previously had 3 paid lines and 6 free ones. That's an exceptionally large number of free lines. I kind of don't necessarily feel as bad for that individual. Moving forward into somewhat of the AI space, OpenAI's first branded hardware is a light-up keyboard. Now, OpenAI last week, we said, is being sued by Apple for stealing Apple's hardware technology, or at least designs and proprietary information. The story we went into last week is a bit lengthy, but goes into how OpenAI is reportedly, according to Apple in the lawsuit, recruiting their employees and enticing them with certain incentives to steal proprietary information and bring it over, presumably so that OpenAI can release hardware that is comparable in quality to Apple. As rumors continue to swirl about OpenAI's work on a personalized smart speaker and other hardware, the company is today rolling out its first branded device, the $230 Codex Micros, a specialized RGB-lit mini keyboard designed to let users monitor and quickly interact with multiple Codex agents with a glance at a few clicks. The device is described as a limited-run collaboration with Work Louder, which already sells a very similar looking Creator Micro line of customizable square keyboards targeted at creative professionals. The Codex Micro differentiates itself from those mainly through 6 frosted keys in the top 2 rows, which offer color-coded live feedback on up to 6 Codex threads, even when they are not in focus on screen. Ideally, those colored keys will cycle from white when a thread is idle to blue when Codex is thinking to green when the task is complete. But the keys can also flash amber when Codex requires feedback or a decision from a human operator is red when a thread encounters an error, letting know at a glance which of their Codex tasks needs immediate attention. A quick tap of the light up button brings the applicable Codex window on screen. So for those who are not using these large language models to write code, effectively what's happening in the world now are that software developers, people who are writing programs and software, are asking the LLM to begin doing their coding work for them and giving them, hopefully, a decent set of instructions on what to carry out with. But because writing software requires often a large number of files to be created, all with their own unique responsibilities, having one large language model do it in linear time, meaning one thing after another, is extremely slow. So in order to save time, you can have several agents doing things at once. Let's say 6, just as an example. And now you can have 6 different things being accomplished at the same time, but at any given time, any one of those instances could have a problem or have a question that it needs you to answer. So this device is basically a light up switch box that lets the person who's doing the programming know that one of their agents needs their attention or their involvement so that they can just press a button and interrupt it. Now, I personally think that this hardware that OpenAI is supposedly going to sell is quite a terrible idea. And I say terrible idea not because it might not sell a few instances. They might sell some of these. They could even sell out of whatever run they're doing. But it's not exactly a great product for OpenAI to sell because it does not show significant confidence in their ability to expand their users' capabilities. So, for example, those of you who listening to this or watching this show right now may not know that your host himself has devices like this, but they require your kind host here to create the instructions that these buttons are tied to himself. So I have control boards similar to what they're selling for OpenAI. But the features that they interact with are up to me. The sky is the limit with what I can do. In fact, one of these buttons is tied to the Quack device on this show. So whenever Alex, the co-host who is normally with me, makes a pun, the Quack comes up. Now, if you're watching the video feed, you will have seen a duck come up on screen at the same time as the audible quack. Those two events are chained together on the key device that I have that I had to program. If you are selling, by and large, a set of programs that is there to help make you a better programmer, one presumes that the first demonstration of your enhanced ability to be a master programmer is having a board that doesn't have these features and just has the buttons that you program yourself using the coding agent. One presumes that would be how you do it, but it doesn't seem like they have enough confidence in the capabilities of the people that they're selling this device to, so they already have it working out of the box. That is why I believe it is a bad idea. A sufficiently advanced user is going to be able to use Codex, the large language model assistant coding program, to code their own boards to have the custom features and work however they want. This company that is helping them do this launch may be able to make a little bit of money, and it might be a good promotion for that company, but I don't think this is a good product for OpenAI to begin as a product line. I think that has a very limited audience, probably only of hobbyists who just like to support OpenAI, and not for anyone serious who is what they call a power user. Now, moving forward, we have what ostensibly might be the first fight of what might be now a robot UFC. Brutal humanoid robot cage match stops abruptly when one of the robot's heads pops off. You might wince at the professional spectacle of two humans beating each other to a pulp, but when it's two robots, we want maximum carnage. Thankfully, the inaugural Ultimate Robot Knockout Legend competition in Shenzhen, China, was derived on providing the most brutal but bloodless spectacle you can lay eyes on. In a video of a cage match between two mechanical humanoids, one of the clanker combatants literally knocks the opponent's block off by delivering a flying kick to the face. The robot continues to fight with its head dangling from between its shoulders and throws a few punches, but not for long. After being knocked to the ground, it flails uncontrollably while trying to get to its feet. The violent jerking severs the cable connecting the hanging head, and the robot collapses onto the ground. The other robot, victorious, dances over the unmoving body. According to the state-run tabloid Global Times, the URKL competition featured 32 teams from around the world who all used T800 humanoid robots from Engine AI, a Chinese robotics company. The point of the competition, according to Engine AI CEO Zhao Tonggang, was twofold: create a global commercial robot fighting brand and promote research and industrialization. Quote, "Let the event feed back into technology and let technology drive the industry," Tong-Yang told Global Times. You can't accuse Tong-Yang of not putting his money where his mouth is. In a video that went viral last December, he donned a suit of armor and let himself take blows from one of his T-800 robots. One kick was so powerful that it slammed him to the ground. It's hard to tell how much of a splash the event made in the country, but it must have been a wild spectacle to witness in person. Legendary martial arts movie star and filmmaker Donnie Yen was in attendance and sounded blown away by what he saw. Honestly, I used to see robot fighting only in science fiction movies, Yen said at the event's opening per Global Times. But today, for the first time, I got to watch real robots fighting up close. The weight of the machines, the precision of their movements, it was incredible, he added. Martial arts is one of the Chinese robot company's favorite ways to show off their capabilities. China stunned the world earlier this year with a televised martial arts display performed by a group of Unitree G1 robots that shared the stage with human actors. So we have our first robot UFC fight taking place in China, and who knows if that's going to take off. Now, of course, each one of these robots is probably fairly expensive, so they're not going to be able to really mass produce them. I wonder, though, at some point if the old show that was on, I forget what channel it was on cable during the mid 2000s, BattleBots. I wonder if there's going to be a version of that where hobbyists are now constructing their own humanoid robots to be able to engage in these fightings, and we'll have similar to the way that you have Formula One racing or something like that, you'll actually have companies doing sponsorships on their robot. I don't know. I'm a little concerned that we're teaching them to fight like people, because we all have seen the movies to know where that leads. Now, moving along, from TechCrunch, Apple and Google ordered to purge nudify apps from app stores. The city of San Francisco has ordered Apple and Google to remove dozens of nudify apps, software programs that can digitally alter pictures to unclothe the people in them, from their app stores. California law criminalizes any activity that knowingly facilitates or recklessly aids or abets the creation of non-consensual deepfake pornography. In 2025, California also passed a law that allows victims to pursue civil actions against third-party facilitators of such material. The city says that despite these well-known regulations, both tech companies have continued to host and make money from such programs. Apple and Google are profiting off apps that exploit women and girls by generating non-consensual intimate deepfakes, San Francisco City Attorney David Chiu said in an emailed statement to TechCrunch. Quote, while the companies cut ties with some problematic apps, Apple and Google have a responsibility to be proactive and vigilant to prevent sexual abuse. Letters sent to Google and Apple by Chiu's office, which were viewed by TechCrunch, note that the companies have been on notice for their role in processing payments for illegal purchases for almost a year, but have nevertheless continued to do so. According to the letters, both companies have been repeatedly warned that they are hosting these apps. In January and again in April, the Tech Transparency Project issued reports and sent letters to both companies noting that there were dozens of apps within their app stores that sold deepfake NCII, non-consensual intimate images, in exchange for payments from processing by the firms. TPP's report from April said that Google and Apple had intentionally steered users towards such apps and called both companies key participants in the spread of AI tools that can turn real people into sexualized images. Additionally, Chiu told Wired that both companies had likely made millions of dollars in fees from apps that offered such services. Now, those of you who have followed me for a long time know that I regularly go on a tirade about Facebook and their abuse of their own supposed advertising policy, where their advertisements are flooded with accounts of suspiciously named accounts, let's just say, things that don't seem to be official accounts, just random ones made by let's say spammers, to advertise these types of programs, and do so in a way that hypothetically, according to Meta, violates their own ad policies by showing nudity. And these advertisements typically are geared towards insinuating that you would be able to take off the clothes of any person you wish to, including, let's say, your neighbor, coworker, or friend's daughter. They're not subtle about it, and I have pointed out how these ads are rampant and provided evidence on my feeds to show how ubiquitous the problem is. So I guess San Francisco is going to the App Store source, although it is fairly simple for someone to simply make a website that pretends to be an app, and you don't actually have to install anything on your phone. So the problem will still exist. So San Francisco is going to have, I guess, their work cut out for them if they want to stop it. Moving forward here, and because we're almost towards the end of this segment here, Microsoft's Nadella, as the CEO of Microsoft, criticizes Anthropic's Fable for being editorially controlled. Now, Fable is the newest LLM model from Anthropic that has had a controversial launch, let's say. First, when they launched, or going to launch it, they launched a preview mode. The main model was called Mythos, and Anthropic had claimed that it was the most powerful hacker model ever created, and that it was able to find what they call zero-day exploits in software that had been known as the most secure software in existence. Zero-day exploits are exploits that have never been found before, meaning the 0th day, if you're counting using the number 0, as programmers typically do, if you're starting with the number 0, that is, the 0 day just means that you're the first person known to possess this flaw, this exploit, something that you can use for hacking purposes, this feature that has a flaw in it, and that this Mythos large language model was able to find these problems exceptionally quick in software that was supposed to be famous for being super secure. And the CEO of Anthropic, this large language AI model company, went on a public tour basically saying that his model was dangerous and that the government needs to do something about dangerous models, which then humorously resulted in the Trump administration banning the model from use by anyone inside of the executive, including the military. Although it made an exception for certain people inside of like the NSA and stuff so that they could do some hacking of foreign adversaries. And then Anthropic was slow rolling the launch to regular users, including keeping it in preview release to just select individual companies, and then doing a very, very limited release where they have put guardrails up for regular users. And that is what the CEO of Microsoft is addressing here. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella told employees Wednesday that Anthropic's limits on requests that users submit to the startup's high-end Fable artificial intelligence model don't make sense. Quote, if you use Fable, when it refuses to do a random thing, it's just like, when was the last time you had a creation tool that was so editorially controlled? Now, to tell people who haven't actually had this experience what's happening, there have been a lot of discussions about what Anthropic has tried to limit its model from doing. One of them is engaging in hacking, or at least significant sophisticated hacking. And the other is what you might call biological hacking, engaging in helping people, let's say, use a product called CRISPR, which is able to do gene editing on DNA and certain things like that. And it basically helps, prevent people from doing something that might be on the cutting edge of terrorism. Let's just, for lack of a better description, anything they might be concerned of that is related to terrorism or something like that. And so users were finding that the ability for Anthropic to stop this activity was very delicate and had a lot of false positive results. So people were asking it to review like a pie recipe, or let's say like a chicken noodle soup recipe, and they were being denied because for reasons of like bioterrorism. It was very, very arbitrary and bizarre what people were experiencing. So that's what the CEO of Microsoft's referring to. Nadella told engineers working on Microsoft's Copilot AI software, according to a copy of his remarks that was provided to CNBC, it doesn't make sense. Microsoft declined to comment, and Anthropic's spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment. When end users ask Fable about some aspects of creating large-scale models, among other topics, Anthropic might send responses from an older version, according to a support page. Some people have called out the rejections on social media. Anthropic said when it announced Fable 5 in early June that it was attempting to reduce false positives for blocked requests. 3 days after the introduction, Anthropic cut off Fable access to comply with the U.S. government export control directive. And on July 1st, the company restored the model, saying, quote, new safeguards will flag a slightly higher fraction of harmless requests. than the previous Fable safeguards. Nadella's comments come as executives have looked more towards cost-efficient models that don't come from the most well-funded labs, but can handle software development and other tasks inside companies. On Thursday, Chinese startup Moonshot AI announced an open-source model that surpasses recent releases from Anthropic and OpenAI. The Microsoft chief's remarks represent criticism of a valued partner and client. Anthropic's Claude Code software development tool has become popular among programmers and people with less technical talent. In November, Microsoft said it was making a $5 billion investment in Anthropic as the startup agreed to spend $30 billion on Microsoft's Azure cloud. This year, Microsoft unveiled Copilot Cowork, a business productivity assistant that draws on the startup's models. Investors have worried that Microsoft could face disruption from models that quickly write software as the company allocates tens of billions per quarter to data center expansion. Shares have fallen 17% this year, while the Nasdaq Composite Index has gained 11%. Lately, Nadella has argued that companies should be able to cost-efficiently develop custom models and draw on internet data without letting it flow out to other entities, such as companies in the business of building models. In a Sunday blog post, he invoked Palantir. CEO Alex Karp, who said on CNBC that technical organizations want to know they own the means of production. Microsoft offers the Foundry service where developers can adopt over 11,000 models, including some of Anthropic and OpenAI. Quote, "It can't be that there are only two companies in the world with token capital and everybody else is renting it," Nadella told engineers. "It makes no economic sense. Tokens measure computing usage of AI models." So this is getting a little technical, and I want to take the time to make sure that listeners and viewers understand what he is being discussed here, because it is going to be a component of the next topic that we get into. So in this world of AI booms, artificial intelligence, large language models, etc., there is a discussion that is coinciding with that, which is whether or not we are in an AI boom, AI bubble, whether the investment towards these activities are a bubble itself, like the dot-com bubble of 2001, and whether or not we are going to have that bubble burst at some point. And that is an extremely complicated question, and I'm not sure I have an authoritative answer, although, of course, I do have an opinion, which I will get into. But part of that question involves several factors, and one of them are these model creators. These model creators create these large language models, these things that they release. Let's say right now the OpenAI versions are a little bit easier to keep track of. They call them GPT-4 or GPT-5, 5.5, 5.6. They name them in ways where the number going up means it's a newer model, whereas Anthropic tends to just give them fancy names like Fable and Mythos and stuff like that. It makes it harder to determine what's a newer model or not. But regardless, these models come out and they are used the way that you've probably used chatbots. You know, you go on to Chat GPT, or if you have used Claude, you go in, you have your chat screen and you talk to it. And every single word and sentence you put in there gets converted into what they call tokens, and roughly tokens you can think of as just half of a word. It cuts up the words into little bits, and those bits are what can be charged on. When you have, let's say, a sentence of 700 words, let's just say that's about 1,400 tokens. The number of tokens it creates is something that you can charge for. So what they call the input, the thing you type, is now 1,400 tokens. And then whatever the large language model spits out, whatever you get back as the answer, it's called the output tokens. Both the input tokens and the output tokens wind up having pricing when you're down at that level. When you're just the average person using ChatGPT, you pay a monthly fee and you get the service and you get to talk to it pretty much as you want. No big deal. That type of cost is not something that you're aware of. But when you are doing this as a business, when you're doing this where you're trying to use these AIs to perform work or help your company do work, or including it in some of your programs, you as the creator / business owner are charged at this level. You actually have to monitor what they call tokens. If you want to just think of them as how many words you're using, that's fine too. Think of how many tokens both in and out, are being generated. Now, I don't know if you've personally noticed this as you talk to ChatGPT or something like that, but they've gotten more verbose, where you can ask it something small that to you might seem like it's a short answer that might be required, and you get about 5 to 6 paragraphs out. This inflates the output tokens, which again are a cost. Each token is a charge. Typically, they're measured in like the millions of tokens, so you might see the price of them by the million, but still, hypothetically, it's charged per token, even though it's fractions of a penny. When the company making these models makes them more verbose, where the smallest thing gives you way too much output, something you're never going to read, it's way too much information, that type of inflation is costing companies money. And this is what the CEO of Microsoft is somewhat calling token capital. The companies that own the models, where even if you're using ChatGPT sort of through Microsoft somehow, OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, is getting residuals. They're getting money back on that model being licensed to Microsoft. So the owners of these models, he's calling that token capital, where every single token that gets used, no matter where it's used, if it's based on that model, the company should get a residual off of it. So he's saying it can't be that there's only 2 companies in the world with token capital and everybody else is renting it. Nadella told the engineers, it makes no economic sense. Tokens measure the computing usage of AI models. Microsoft tied itself tightly to OpenAI through a series of investments, but the 2 companies drifted and became competing with each other after the abrupt 2023 ousting or reinstatement of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, with a little notice to Nadella. OpenAI said in April it would bring its models beyond Azure to cloud infrastructure leaders Amazon. Now, the reason that he's making a complaint about the token capital only being held by so many companies is that training these models is a significant amount of work. Elon Musk's Grok, which he started at XAI, was an effort that he had to play catch up on. And to some degrees, I guess you could say he did successfully play catch up, but he had to spend an excessive amount of money to build a data center that had more servers and more computational power than pretty much anyone before it. So in order to enter the market as a player, the cost of entry is so high now that very few people can do it. And we are going to wind up where better and better models are only able to be created by 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 companies. So these Chinese models, which they're calling open source, I'll get into, are becoming a huge problem for that model, and we're going to get to that. So OpenAI said in April it would bring its models beyond Azure to cloud infrastructure leader Amazon. Now, OpenAI had cut a deal with Microsoft about 2 years ago and made Microsoft an exclusive provider of their models. So if you were a business and you are making your programs use these large language models to assist in something, and you're with Microsoft Azure, you have access to OpenAI, and Microsoft pays OpenAI its residuals for your usage. However, Amazon did not get in on that deal. So if you're going to Amazon to try to use large language models, you don't have access to OpenAI's ChatGPTs. Nadella also said it's good for Microsoft, it's merging products for consumer and corporate workers. In March, he announced that a former Snap executive, Jacob Andrew, would take charge of Copilot across both categories. The unification is something we should have done maybe on day one, he said in April. Microsoft said it has over 20 million paid seats for the work-centric Copilot, or 4% of the cloud-based Office customer base. So Copilot is the application that Microsoft has attempted to make compete with ChatGPT and Claude's OpenAI, but its models, the models that they've used behind the scenes have always been terrible. Microsoft's never been able to actually generate a model themselves that has been worth any use. So that's why they are typically licensing from OpenAI. But when he's talking about the token capital, paying another company to license their product when you can't, because you can't make one yourself, seems like it's not a great deal. So China this week or last week, which we're going to get into, has released a model open source, meaning anyone is allowed to download it, anyone is allowed to modify it, and there's no one to pay royalties to for having it, that is competing with the newest Anthropic model and the newest OpenAI model, but the same model that Anthropic just a couple weeks ago was saying was the most dangerous model and the government needed to do something about dangerous models, and it got them shut down. This model that China has just released open source is a competitor now, a fair competitor, but is all in open source, meaning there isn't a company that you would pay royalties to for using it. China's 2.8 trillion parameter Kimi K3 beats Claude Fable 5 in front-end code arena benchmark. Moonshot AI delivers largest open-weight AI model ever as China works around U.S. compute limits. And this is thick, so we're going to get into it, and I'll explain as much as I can. And I will open up to any questions if anyone needs further clarification if my explanations are not sufficient. Beijing-based Moonshot AI has released Kimi K3, a 2.8 trillion parameter model that the company describes in its technical blog as the world's first open 3T class system and the largest open-weight AI model to date. Moonshot said K3 still sits behind Anthropic's Claude Fable 5 and OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Sol on overall performance, but it outperformed every other model in the company's evaluation suite, including Claude Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5, across coding and agentic benchmarks. The model has a 1 million token context window, native vision, and activates just 16 of its 896 experts per token, roughly 1.8% of the pool. Full weights are due by July 27th. Arena ranked K3 first in its frontier code evaluation at 1,679 points ahead of Fable 5 in the blind developer testing. API pricing is 30 cents per million cache hit input tokens, $3 per million on cache misses, and 15 million per output tokens. Kimi K2 launched a year ago at 60 cents per million input tokens, so uncached K3 inputs got 5 times much. Now those pricings are way too technical. I'm not getting to all the nuance of that, but roughly you could see what I was talking about. $3 per million on cache misses, meaning $3 per million tokens. So that's the input price. So you start typing, you start giving it inputs. Let's say you're having it read something, you get a million input tokens, and that's a $3 cost. Now that's not necessarily the cost you have to pay this Moonshot company, but it's the cost that's going to cost you anywhere to run it. Something that you're paying energy costs, you're paying a server to run it. That's going to be what you're going to be paying there. And then $15 per million output tokens. Again, when the LLM responds to you, it gives you your answer back, and your answer is really long-winded and it's way too much more than you wanted it, that's $15 per million output tokens. And that's where people are starting to get upset because the models are giving you much more than you may have claimed that you needed and costing much more of an expense than the input tokens for reasons, but that's getting these businesses upset. Moonshot claims roughly a 2.5x improvement in scaling efficiency over Kimi K2, attributed to 2 architectural changes: Kimi Delta Attention, a hybrid linear attention scheme, and attention residuals, which change how information moves between layers. This is all technical stuff about the improvement that's not necessarily important to the point. Moonshot's kernel optimization benchmark ran on NVIDIA's H200, which is what the blog identifies as a GPU from an alternate vendor, which the company didn't name. Minitron, a Triton-like compiler K3 built from scratch, is charting against Triton in an NVIDIA L20, and to cut down the database card sold in China under U.S. export rules, Moonshot recommends serving K3 on supernodes of 64 or more accelerators, keeping expert parallel traffic inside one high bandwidth domain. Okay, so this model that China has released, according to the benchmarks, performs just under the best models that you can buy from Anthropic or that you can use on Anthropic or OpenAI. And this is where the AI bubble, are we an AI bubble question, gets really, really heated up, and the economics of engaging in this activity becomes a little bit questionable. So OpenAI and Anthropic and 1 or 2 other companies in the United States like XAI have the capital investment already and the resources at least and the infrastructure to be able to train the latest and greatest models. These latest and greatest models are presumably what people would like to use in the average circumstance on any given day. Most people don't necessarily. There are some people who have nuances and niches, but on the average, people prefer the latest and greatest as opposed to the best last week. And those models are owned by Anthropic or OpenAI or XAI, and only a few companies can really make them. When the company puts all that money into making the model, there is not exactly a clear, direct way to recuperate the expense of making it. So if you consider this just the segment of research and development, making the model is the research and development. The research and development that goes into making the brand new latest and greatest model is exorbitant. Billions of dollars get spent on making the new model. You would not only have the expense of the human element, so you have people who need to be sophisticated and technologically inclined to be able to assist in making it. You have to understand the training model the training data and the systems that you're using to try to make the model better, because again, you're attempting to make it perform on the average human task and attempt to beat these scaled metrics that are numerical and being competed against basically tests you're trying to make it pass that have rankings that can let you kind of say one model is better than the other at some particular task. And you're trying to expend billions and billions of dollars to get this new model created. But once the new model is created, there is no direct line to making your money back. Those billions of dollars you've now spent, that is now spent. And you have to get people to, let's say, buy the product. So the way that you have to get the people to buy the product is you have to cut a licensing deal like with Microsoft, or you have to make sure that your model is hosted on servers that are already configured to be able to allow this type of model to be used. And then that can be sold to customers. And like I've just described for the last 10 minutes or so, the pricing model on that is done what they call per token. And again, you can think of it as just per word if that makes it easier of a metric for you. So if people only use your model for a couple weeks because now another company has just released their latest and greatest model, because all of these companies are constantly doing models and each one's releasing a brand new one every couple weeks. If you only have a few weeks where your model is now on top, effectively you have to make all of that research and development money back in those few weeks, or you've lost money on that model effectively. You could make it back over time, perhaps, if people still used that model for a very, very long time, which can happen in some circumstances. But if the actual volume of usage, the main amount of usage is only a couple weeks long, that's the window you have to make it back, it remains to be said at this point whether that's a sustainable economy. And it remains to be seen. There hasn't actually been a situation where we've in isolation been able to say that these companies have a reproducible, profitable model. Now, and I'm using model in two ways here. Model both in the large language model itself, but also economic model, meaning a actual profitability model. Now, this Moonshot AI Kimi K3 performing nearly as good as those other models, but not being owned in a way that you have to pay license to someone, is very, very enticing for companies, where one, it means the ability to deprecate the model, meaning take the model off the market if you've come to rely on it, is lower, because it's an open source model. There's almost no reason to take that model off the market. A company like Anthropic or OpenAI has incentives to take older models off the market, because if companies are, let's say, stuck on older models, you don't want them on those older models because you need to make your money back on the newer models. The older models aren't necessarily getting you your money back on the newest investment. So you want them to migrate to the newer models so that you can claim the money on that, because your margins are going to be higher on the newer models. But something like Kimi K3 comes in, and now the people who want to use that model may have to pay only something more closer to the computational / energy costs of running that model, and not the increased margin that they would have to pay back to Anthropic or OpenAI to recover the cost of R&D. This threatens the ability of Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI to recuperate the costs. That it threatens their ability to do so. So the situation gets more complicated. This is the part of the are we in an AI bubble that gets really, really difficult. It is somewhat classically said in a cynical way that Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, their models are all based off of the stolen intellectual property of everyone on the internet. In fact, Anthropic recently settled a lawsuit where a large part of their training data came from books that they did not purchase. They've sort of downloaded or were accused to have downloaded books off of, let's say, the illicit internet and used those books, PDF versions or whatnot, as part of their training data. So they stole someone's intellectual property, quote unquote, to be able to produce their large language model. A part of this controversy and let's say international tension between the Trump administration and China in the AI race involves the accusation that Chinese AI systems are not doing all of this work to build the models themselves, that they are stealing the intellectual property of our AI companies. And Anthropic has accused several companies in China of running what they call a distillation attack. Now, a distillation attack is not really an attack. It is just an extension of the training process that already exists. So instead of having the books that you're going to train the model off of, or the internet answers, the Reddit posts, or anything else as part of your training data set, you're actually just taking someone else's large language model, you're putting stuff into it, getting the outputs of it, and using that information to help train your model. So Anthropic is accusing lots of places in China of doing just that, setting up thousands of accounts for Anthropic, and then executing a whole bunch of inputs and outputs, taking those results and then training their models, which makes their models somewhat competitive, somewhat better than they originally were, but not wholly original. Now, the key irony here is that it is argued that a large portion of the training data that OpenAI and Anthropic and XAI are working off of is stolen intellectual property. And those same very companies that profited, so to speak, off of stolen intellectual property, are they themselves complaining about stolen intellectual property by China? I'm not sure how much of this Kimi K3 was done through, again, this what they call a distillation attack, which is taking the inputs and outputs of another model and using it as your training data. But even if it is a large portion, it is very difficult for that to ever stop, because people, when they use their own large language model, they are in possession of their inputs and outputs directly and could always just save them and use them to train. So there's going to be this information widely available for China to, quote, steal and use in training their large language models to be somewhat competitive with the US ones. It is said, broadly speaking, that some of that is cheaper. It requires less investment when you're just stealing what the large players have created. And if that's the case, the idea that they can recover their R&D is that much more tenuous. It is much more difficult to recover your R&D if you can't charge for that even that short time period of a few weeks when your model is on top. If you can't charge that premium per token, so to speak, you can't necessarily recover your costs. So now, if all of a sudden your time and ability to recuperate your costs is even further taken away, because as soon as you release your version, China has some model that they've now released open source, again, meaning that nobody is charging you per usage like that. You can copy it as many times as you want, copy it, put it wherever you want, modify it however you want. That is a threat to these companies trying to recuperate their R&D. Now, with all that explained, there was a little bit of controversy among some of the players this week that happened on X, and some ideas for what maybe can be done about it to prevent the AI bubble from possibly being a real bubble. Because if these companies are unable to eventually recuperate their costs on building the models, that's where I believe personally the bubble will be found. All these investments have been made to the companies in order to get them to produce better and better models. But if at no point are these models able to recuperate that investment off of just the model building, that bubble will have to pop, because that's not a profitable economic model, even if the models themselves are great. So Dean Ball, the head of strategic futures at OpenAI, posted this on Twitter/X just the other day. Some observations on Kimi. It's a very good model. I don't think its performance can be explained away by distillation, so I'm glad I explained that in advance, or anything like that. In agentic coding sessions, meaning where you're using it to help you code, it seems pretty much on par with the best public models of Q1 2026, so just a few months ago. In my fairly limited use, it also seemed very token hungry. It's not obvious to me that this model is actually that cheap to run. So token hungry, just as I sort of explained, is probably coming from him meaning that it's overly verbose in its output, that it puts too much out versus what it gets in, and is not as judicious on that expenditure, which means that it's more costly. Even if you're not paying per token to a company for licensure, you still have to pay for the energy to run it on the computers. I am personally surprised that Chinese state continues to allow open sourcing of models this good, given the potential risks. To be clear, I myself might be fine with models presenting this level of marginal risk being open weight, but I am surprised that China is fine with it. I suspect the reason they are is 75% explained by strategic blindness, lack of AGI-pilledness. AGI-pilledness being that you aren't afraid of the AGI coming, and that it's not going to be done by the LLMs, therefore it's not a big problem. And he puts in parentheses, the CCP is very Jan LeCun-like in its views of AI. Jan LeCun is a skeptic that the large language models are actually the breakthrough in AI that gets us to artificial general intelligence, which means, let's say, human-like intelligence running autonomously in perpetuity as an entity. The other 25% or so is their lack of compute for customer inference, making China's open weight strategy an unintended byproduct of U.S. export controls. And the normal Chinese strategy of aggressive exports. For the companies, as opposed to the government, the decision to open source is partially ideological, and partially because they are behind, and they know that very few people would pay for sub-frontier models from China, meaning if they didn't open source it, few people would even experiment with it if it wasn't the latest and greatest. Open weight models are inherently decelerationist. That's a term I can get into if necessary, and I'm continually surprised to see the so-called accelerationists so excited about open weight models. I suspect the reason they are is that they know open weight models are effectively ungovernable, and they simply like the overall cloak of ungovernability open weight models create for the whole of AI. It's not a bad strategy. Reminds me of the James Scott's recounting of the Hilla people in the, quote, The Art of Not Being Governed. Still, in this end, open weight models deter further AI capex, capital expenditure. One probable outcome of an open weight model dominant world is full of AI communism, which is precisely what China proposes, rather than a market product. AI is a public good, which will ultimately be provided by the state as a kind of digital public infrastructure. Now, I want to take a pause here and explain what the term public good here is, because a lot of people don't know what that means in its usage. So, in economics, something is called a public good when it meets two criteria. It is non-exclusionary and non-rival. Those two terms are terms of art. Non-exclusionary means that the item itself, and a good doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you. It just means it's in the same way of goods and services. But something is a public good if it is non-exclusionary and non-rival. Non-exclusionary means that it's almost impossible to stop people from using it. So non-exclusionary comes into play. Non-rivalry means that your consumption of this good doesn't take away someone else's consumption. It doesn't stop someone else's consuming it. So an apple is not a public good. If I consume an apple, you can't consume that same apple. The apple is now consumed, and only one of us can do it because it is a rivalrous good. And the stereotypical Econ 101 example of a public good is something like fireworks. People generally enjoy fireworks and the celebration surrounding the fireworks display, but fireworks are non-exclusionary because anyone within eyesight distance can see the fireworks and cannot easily be excluded from participating in the viewing of the fireworks. And it is non-rivalrous. My being able to see the fireworks display does not stop someone else from seeing the fireworks display. No part of that fireworks display is consumed, making that person consume less, making it a non-rivalrous thing. Therefore, it's a public good. The public good designation comes with it a set of problems, conceptually speaking, when it comes to getting this good even made. A fireworks display has to be funded by someone. It has to be organized by someone. And that type of situation has somewhat of its own solution. It's done by and large either through public works funding, meaning taxes are paid by citizens of an area and the government decides to throw the fireworks display so that you have it. Or such things can be done by sponsorship, where companies willing to, let's say, get some goodwill of advertising will fund an event, and there will be advertising done at and nearby the event to help defray the costs of the fireworks display event. Those are solutions to this public good problem. But by and large, throughout the 1990s, 2000s internet explosion era into, let's say, the mid 2000s, when things like Napster and LimeWire began to explode, a lot of the things that we considered regular goods started to become public goods, and not meaning that they should be free, but that they wind up having this problem. If you recall, Napster and LimeWire were the first sort of things where community sharing of music and sometimes other things like books in PDF form and viruses, of course, could be had by many. And it seemed it was exploiting this public nature good of the vulnerability in these items due to computers being involved. For someone to make a copy of an MP3 is a non-rivalrous activity. Making a copy of a song, a copy of a PDF book, copy of those items does not stop the original consumer from having it. Unlike in Apple, nobody's copy disappears. You've made a copy. The item in question does not get depleted in its availability. The excludability, when something like Napster and LimeWire were invented, was destroyed. Previously, something like a CD or a tape, they had the ability to be copied, but it was more laborious. It was labor intensive to make the copy. So there was still somewhat of what a marginal excludability component. You roughly, by and large, had to purchase the music from a store, from some place where the music was already in a format that could be consumed. The average person wasn't making mass copies to remove this excludability format. But as the internet carried on, the ability for people to copy music, and of course, even now, movies, was so easy that those goods wound up effectively becoming somewhat of a public good. And the solutions we've had so far, some people find undesirable. Solutions like Spotify or YouTube Music, things like that, where what you do is you pay a small monthly fee and get access to an entire catalog of streaming. A lot of people say those solutions aren't particularly great, particularly some of the artists who say that that's not great for their bottom line, blah, blah, blah. Highlights the problem that winds up coming with something becoming a public good. It winds up being difficult to find ways of establishing charge because it's not excludable and non-rivalrous. Those two together make it really hard to charge for the consumption of that good or the usage of the good. Now, again, it's non-rivalrous, so a person, if someone listens to an artist's song, that artist should not necessarily be completely upset if that person didn't pay per listen, right? They're not paying every single time they listen to it, but on a Spotify-like platform, the artist sees the number of times their song was listened to and feels cheated by the lack of connection between the number of times people listened to that song and their amount of royalties. Whereas in the CD days, the competition over the physical product and the ability to exclude people from the physical product was where the profits were seen. And I could listen to a song I've purchased on a CD 100,000 times, and the artist would never know that I did that. So there's a disconnect between the ability to tie your the good that you are trying to sell with the purchase of that good because of this public goods problem. And we are encroaching that now in the AI world, leading to a further question of whether or not this AI bubble is a bubble or not. China releasing an open weights model like this, of this caliber, starts to encroach, as I was describing earlier, on the regular models from Anthropic and OpenAI, entering into public goods territory, to the point where when you are producing something that is excludable, meaning you are trying to exclude people from it, they are more likely to just take the version that isn't excluded, something that isn't being held back by gatekeeping, because their argument is that they'll take a little bit of loss on the quality, a little bit of loss for the flexibility of not having to compete with any sort of exclusionary principle. So that is the situation we're in. So he's describing it, AI is a public good, which will ultimately be provided by the state as a kind of digital public infrastructure. So as I was describing the way that some of the fireworks solutions are solved, which is by government taxes and scheduled events for holidays, this guy from OpenAI is somewhat predicting that might be where we are headed. This future strikes me as a dystopian hellscape, but I've never met an open weight models advocate who doesn't ultimately concede this is where things end. You'd be surprised how many accelerationists lobbied me while I was in government to support an 11 or 12 figure federally funded data center so that startups could train models at a subsidy and then give them away for free. There was no other way for AI to progress, they said. Perhaps this is the logical end of things. Nonetheless, I find myself surprised to see supposed accelerationists excited about such an outcome. I think many of them just don't know what they are doing. Many accelerationists do not view the creation and serving of frontier models as a legitimate business. So I think what he's doing here is describing the thing that I've been talking about and explaining somewhat at length here now today. Many accelerationists do not view the creation and serving of frontier models as a legitimate business. So again, that R&D recuperation cost is a problem. I would guess that the Trump administration will at some point realize that their best strategy here would be to create large amounts of regulatory risk around the use of open weight Chinese models. You don't need to ban open source, as one of the dumber motifs of AI policy discussion has unfolded. You just need to direct every agency to issue soft law that creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Quote, a Federal Reserve Advisory Bulletin found that there may be backdoors in Chinese AI models. It needn't be that well justified. You just create enough regulatory risk that every regulated enterprise backs off. You probably don't want to create so much regulatory risk that you scare off the hyperscalers from serving Chinese models. Hyperscalers are the companies that are involved in building the large AI data centers that let you run these models from. There's a happy middle ground here. I'd assume they will do some version of this. It's probably true that open weight models of this capability make the world a bit more dangerous, but not so much more that you'll really notice. At some point, the models will be capable enough that you will notice. Quote, a non-living, invisible, dangerous, and infinitely self-replicating agent escaped from a Chinese lab, you say? Color me shocked. So that was the post from he's the head of strategic futures at OpenAI, discussing in his words some of the economic problems that I've been trying to lead into here. Then the account Beth Bezos, who is that's not his real name, it's a play off of Jeff Bezos, but he is a former Google DeepMind employee, replied to this, or quote tweeted this thread. He says, memes aside, I do think Dean points out a predicament we're in. He's not wrong that if there is no way to privatize some of the gains from model making, the rate of AI capital expenditure growth will inevitably slow down, or as I'm referring to it, this is my aside, the bubble. all that investment going into these things will wind up not profitable, and then all of that profit just becomes spent debt. It's now just debt owned by the companies. China is trying to squeeze our capitalist system with this tactic. I do not think soft regulatory risk increase around open source is the way to go. I do think that adding import tariffs on Chinese open source models is a much better hammer. That is, for any business running Chinese models as a service, they are taxed per token at a rate depending on the model capability equivalent market price. This both protects American frontier closed labs margins that they can reinvest in capital expenditure and gives an advantage to local US and allies open source models. Chinese token tariffs is better than regulatory uncertainty for open source AI. The tariff revenues should be then invested into the big and little tech companies with favorable terms to fund their capital expenditure. Some could be through some debt mechanism through equity. This would give citizens automatic skin in the game too. This is the way to beat China, in my opinion. Now, that's his opinion, even though the words were in my opinion, but that's his opinion. And I do not like either of those solutions, but I'm not necessarily proposing anything specifically in place either, because sometimes the world does not provide you with solutions that you may want. I find ideas like this, the Chinese token tariff proposal here, ill-formed and not well thought out. I don't think he spent exactly as much time trying to think this through, because I think if you were to try to explain what you meant, it would wind up in definition hell and you wouldn't be able to put your finger on it. So let's pretend that we had this idea, this Chinese open source model tariff tax. Well, what makes something Chinese? All right. Well, I guess presumably you can say if a Chinese company, official company, puts out this model as an official release, and that it is something that is then Chinese. But then that starts to beg the question, is anything that has had Chinese origin at any time, and I want to fix myself, it raises the question. I don't want any jerk autistic philosopher to come back to me and says begs the question is the wrong phrase. I understand that. Raises the question. Is any history being touched by a Chinese firm or anyone in China make something a Chinese model? These models are not permanently fixed. You can always change the way that they are trained. You can take a model that already exists, you can retrain it and add on to it. You can add new training to it to give it new capabilities. And a lot of these models are based off of that premise, that you can take something that's already performing and retrain it and continue to train it. There is no actual baked in stopping point for these models. So it raises the question, does anything that has ever had Chinese history, is that a Chinese model? How much extra training do you need to do on a Chinese model to no longer make it classify as a Chinese model for this tax? Or do you have some quantification of, quote, how much training you add on to it that, let's say, gradually reduces the amount of tax? Does it as a scalar cost, like maybe half of it, instead of the full tax, it's now half of the tax because you've done X amount of additional training on this Chinese model? Questions like that are clearly not going to have answers this early in a proposal like that. The proposal itself is too ill-formed to even really have legs. Needs a lot more fleshing out. What happens, for example, if parts of the model were trained in China, but only a limited amount, and it was bounced back to someone who took it from one iteration of a Chinese model, added like twice as much extra training of America, it got bounced back to China, because again, these are open source, which means anyone can do anything to them. It gets bounced back to just some Chinese citizens, not even a Chinese company, who do a little extra stuff, or in collaboration with Chinese citizens in the United States, you're doing some fun stuff, because again, this is an open source model, and now you're baking it in. How do you calculate that this, what portion of this is a Chinese model and subject to this Chinese tax? Okay, fine. let's say that you do that work. Now all of a sudden you have the Chinese models appropriately calibrated to the amount of China that's in them, and you can tax them at a Chinese rate that might be prorated based off the percentage of Chinese involvement. Well, there's plenty of other places that model could come from origin as a trap. So if China knows, okay, look, our strategy to force the AI model issue into a public goods problem, and let's say thwart the United States companies from earning profits off of the models they generate. If we've done that, but now they've thwarted our ability to do that because they're charging this tariff, well, I guess we'll just secretly have companies in other countries that are going to release these open source models and try to clean our hands of Chinese involvement. We're going to try to make sure that it doesn't look like it came from China, so that it's now not a Chinese model. What's going to prevent them from doing that? How would you ascertain it? And do you now need a regulatory agency that is monitoring the entire internet to make sure that no models are based off of that? I mean, it is possible to have a signature on these models, roughly speaking. They have a signature, but if you make any modifications to them, that signature changes. So how close does that signature need to be? Like, these questions are just not answered. I don't like the way that this discussion is going. It's all turning into a little bit of a bizarre, you have to work against capitalism in order to save capitalism type of idea. We have to, go against free market principles in order to save the free market. Sort of George W. Bush thing. But that's there's a little bit of my diatribe there, hopefully explaining some of this situation to those who would like to know more but didn't. I'm going to open this up to requests to speak if anyone would like to speak. I see our favorite Donald J. Trump, a very stable genius, in the audience. If he has any comments or anything there, I hate to put him on the spot here, but we have a small live audience on the spaces here, so I didn't unfairly pick him out there if he has anything to say. If not, I think that's going to end this episode of This Dumb Week. It's been an interesting one with all sorts of ebbs and flows. No one's requesting to speak, so I think that I'm going to start closing this out. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we won't have the AI bubble collapse if it's there. The stock market won't plummet, and people will be worried if it's going to be a recession or whatnot. But who knows what the future holds, and who knows if China's going to continue. We do have a request to speak. Let's see if we get this. It is Donald J. Trump, very stable genius. Donald J. Trump, I did approve you to speak. Hopefully you will connect very soon here. Sir, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, sir. No, I was just going to say, unfortunately, I missed all the stuff before the AI, and I'm kind of in the middle of the yard right now, but it's been fun listening to it. I just wish I had something to add.
Well, if you go back and replay this, and particularly the video feed of this, you might be able to catch me bringing up Basil Marceau, and I don't know, do you remember Basil Marceau by any chance? Have you ever heard
that? I do not.
Okay.
No, what's it in relation to?
Ashley Webb, one of the replacement candidates in Maine to replace Graham Plattner on an emergency basis in the Democratic primary. That gentleman slash lady.
I'm just going to assume if they're a communist, it's probably not good.
Well, if you listen to the replay, look out for the Maine Democratic primary section and see if you ever saw Basil Marceau. If not, that is a wonderful treat I have brought back from the annals of history of the late 2010s, which was a wonderful gubernatorial candidate in Tennessee who had a very special place in many people's hearts. Very special character.
By God, sir, that sounds amazing.
All right. Well, thank you for the comments, sir. I look forward to having this show next week. I hope everybody have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you next Sunday.